Chapter 12-19. Huang Song's family background was a shortcoming that could not be ignored. Ordinary aristocratic families looked down on him. It was the right time to become an official. Not only would he not lower himself, but he could also help Huang Song and increase his bargaining chips. If they waited for Huang Song to conquer the world before relying on him, it would just be the icing on the cake, and Huang Song wouldn't even care. Who would have thought that Jiang Pingji, the bandit, would emerge as a new force? She single-handedly muddled the situation, and in the end, she made a beautiful comeback. Are you stupid? He was indeed a fool. Where was Feng Ju? Why would Huang Song, who was poor and had no foundation, need Feng Ju's help? Tang Yao and Feng Jin's original thoughts were very similar. Since Feng Ju was already so rebellious, he might as well go into the sea and become a lord to conquer the world. He was the lord, and he was the strategist. If Feng Ju's business improved, the Feng Group would still be his most solid trump card. Wasn't this better than relying on Huang Song? To make a common analogy, the N generations of super-rich people didn't start their own businesses, but instead helped ordinary middle-class kids to start their own businesses. His brain must have been flooded with water. All in all, he did not understand the mind of a prodigy. Feng Sanlang became an official and helped Huang Song, not for fame, not for profit, and not to show his ambition and cleanse the world. Tang Yao thought of something, and a suspicious blush appeared on his face. He deliberated and said, maybe he helped Huang Song for another reason. If Huang Song's army is defeated, Feng Sanlang's life will not be in danger, but he will be trapped in the middle of the wilderness. Perhaps that will be exactly what he wants. The more he said, the more Tang Yao believed in his own judgment. He rubbed his hands excitedly as if he had discovered a piece of gossip. What kind of eyesight did Master Yuanjing have? How could he not see through a student's imagination? According to Tang Yao's logic, Feng Ren did not beat his son, Feng Ju, to death because of his father's true love for his son. Feng Ju helped Huang Song wholeheartedly without asking for anything else. Maybe it was also some kind of true love. This kind of flawless logic is great. Master Yuanjing felt exhausted. He vaguely understood the real reason why Feng Ju helped Huang Song. Speaking of which, Feng Sanlang is quite similar to me when I was young, Tang Yao exclaimed and looked up at Yuanjing. Similar. Very similar, Master Yuanjing could not help but laugh. High talent, arrogant, and self-centered. It was precisely because there was no difficulty in learning anything that he came up with the idea that everyone else is stupid, but I'm the only smart one. On one hand, he felt that nothing in the world could be too difficult for him. On the other hand, he was tirelessly looking for things that could frustrate him. Naturally, this is also the reason why I set up the Tao of having students everywhere. He felt that he was too smart. He had to find something difficult to stump him, or else it would be too boring. Life was so long. Was he going to be bored and idle away his entire life? Dispirited my ass, let's get high. Of course, such Chinibu thoughts were something that only came to him when he was young. After years of accumulation and growth, Mr. Yuanjing really liked the feeling of teaching and educating people. He followed his own path seriously. Feng Ju was most likely the same. Perhaps to Feng Sanlang, helping an impossible person to ascend the world is a very interesting thing. Master Yuanjing smiled bitterly and said, although I've never met him, Feng Sanlang made me feel like I was looking at my younger self. It was unknown if he had already found his own Tao, or if he was still blindly moving forward. If it's the former, he won't have any regrets even if he loses, right? Because he didn't know what he really wanted, he would not feel regret even if he lost it after wasting so many years. When Feng Ju really matured and looked back, would he feel heartache and regret? Master Yuanjing sighed. That night, at the Qing mansion. It's gone, it's really gone. The doctor tested Qing Chang's temperature. Indeed, the fever had started to go down. The servant girl in the room immediately passed the good news to Mrs. Qing, Qing Yuan, and Qing Sanyang, who were waiting anxiously outside. When the three of them heard the good news, they immediately cried tears of joy. It was good that the fever had gone down. If Qing collapsed, their backbone would be gone. Mrs. Qing put her palms together gratefully and said, "Son, remember to prepare a generous gift tomorrow and personally thank Master." Qing Yuan nodded heavily with his eyes red. They endured for a few more hours. Dawn broke, and the first ray of sunlight broke through the clouds. "He's awake, Master is awake." Good news came one after another. Mrs. Qing walked excitedly to Qing Chang's bed with the help of her children. Wen Fu, Madame Qing was very emotional. Tears welled up in her eyes and rolled down her cheeks. Qing felt his body heavy. He couldn't move his limbs. His eyelids were so heavy as if they were filled with lead water. He couldn't open his eyes no matter how hard he tried. When he was seriously ill, he still had some consciousness and could hear the sounds of the outside world. Hearing that his relatives were so worried about him, Qing Chang's sorrow for losing his eldest son lessened a little. He opened his eyes with difficulty and flicked his fingers a few times. His blurry vision gradually became clear. He felt that he had been lying there for a long time. His body and bones were so numb that they didn't feel like his own. It took him a while to recover. "Madam," Qing Chang's eyes turned and fell on his second son and daughter who were kneeling at the side. His heart warmed. He was about to raise his hand, but before he could raise it too high, his wife held it tightly. Qing forced a weak smile. "Your husband has woken up. This is a happy occasion. Don't cry. You guys should also persuade her. Crying too much will hurt her eyes." Qing Yuan and his sister went up to persuade Mrs. Qing. The family of four was surrounded by a warm atmosphere. There was a saying in the world that illness came like a landslide and went away like spinning silk. This saying was not suitable for Qing. The doctor felt his pulse and was surprised to find that Qing Chang's body seemed to have no hidden dangers other than being a little weak. On the contrary, because of this serious illness, the stagnant qi of illness had been released from his body. He would recover after resting for a while. This is really strange. I've never heard of this before. The doctor sighed. Mrs. Chang's heart skipped a beat. She told Qing about Yuan Jing's words. "Sir is really straightforward." Qing looked surprised and said, "Madam, you don't know this. When I was seriously ill, I faintly felt that my body was getting lighter and lighter. There seemed to be countless sounds in my ears. Not long after, I had a mysterious dream. There were only a few scenes in the dream, but the contents of the dream confirmed Sir's assertion. I lost 2 sons and a daughter, and even my wife died of illness." Mrs. Chang's heart skipped a beat. She quickly grabbed Qing Chang's hand. "What should we do?" Qing said, "Didn't Sir say that his fate has changed? Great misfortune has turned into great fortune. This is already a blessing from God." The death of his eldest son could not be saved, but Qing really did not want to lose his other 2 children. Mrs. Qing said, "In the future, I will do more good deeds. I only hope that God will count this good karma on Sun Er's head. I hope that he will have no worries in his next life." Since such a mysterious thing had happened, Mrs. Qing also believed in the words of accumulating good deeds. Qing said, "Yes, your husband will be with you." He held his wife in his arms. The husband and wife remained silent. Qing thought about more things in his heart, which strengthened his belief. What he was doing now was beneficial to the people's wisdom. If he really succeeded, would it not be a good deed that would be passed down for generations? Chapter 1220. The news of Su Pei's defeat spread like wildfire. When Huang Song found out about it, he locked himself in his study for 2 days. The officials in the tent were deeply worried, afraid that this matter would completely destroy Huang Song's fighting spirit. If he lost his fighting spirit, what was the point of fighting? In the early hours of the 3rd day, Huang Song walked out of the study with a normal expression, as if he had not been the one who had been locked up for the past 2 days. Huaijie, Yumo, why are you here? Huang Song saw 2 familiar figures standing in front of the study and called out to them. The 2 of them immediately turned around and bowed. Feng Ju said, "Naturally, we were worried about you, Lord. That's why we waited here. We didn't expect you to come out so soon." Before Huang Song went into seclusion, he had instructed that no one was to disturb him. Even Feng Ju did not dare to barge in. "It's my fault. I've made you worry for nothing." Huang Song was startled and said guiltily, "Recently, the situation has been grim. I'm a little frustrated, so I wanted to be alone and analyze the pros and cons." The sage also said that one should reflect on oneself 3 times a day. Naturally, I have to reflect on myself and find my mistakes and shortcomings to calm my restless mood. I'm fine now. You don't have to worry. Feng Ju and Qing Jing exchanged a look. They had thought that Huang Song had been affected by Su Pei's death. Now, it seemed that not only had Huang Song not collapsed, but his fighting spirit had also been stimulated. This was what they were willing to see. If Huang Song was a piece of trash that couldn't be helped, it would be disappointing. Qing Jing gave Feng Ju a look, and the latter understood. Feng Ju could ask some offensive questions, but Qing Jing could not. After all, Huang Song's trust in the 2 of them was different. Feng Ju asked casually, "What have you realized in the past 2 days, Lord?" "I've reflected on many problems. For example, how did Lanting get to where she is today, where I'm lacking compared to her?" Huang Song's expression was normal, without a hint of displeasure. "After some reflection, I have to admit that I'm not as good as Lanting." Huang Song had indeed seriously reflected on himself for 2 days. He had read the news of the past countless times. Each time he read it, he had a different understanding. The more he read, the more frightened he became. Feng Ju said, "My lord, don't belittle yourself. Everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. The Duke of Lanting is not perfect. Huaijie, you don't have to console me. I can still judge right from wrong. If he could win, then he could win. If he couldn't win, then he couldn't win. There was nothing to be afraid of. Forcefully belittling Lanting is just deceiving yourself and others." A hint of a smile appeared on Huang Song's face. His burning eyes carried a bit of sharpness. The situation in the world is changing rapidly. Even if it's not as good now, it's not impossible to catch up in the future. Seeing that Huang Song was full of vigor, the 2 of them completely put down their worries. It is not too late to mend the dungeon after the sheep is lost. Huang Song continued, "When Lanting finishes resting, he will most likely find an excuse to attack me." Qing Jing and Feng Ju did not say anything. This was the consensus of everyone. Although Lanting is strong, I am not weak either. If she wants to beat me, she'll have to show her skills. Huang Song's expression was solemn. He suddenly took a step back and clasped his hands in front of his chest. He said to the 2 of them, "Huaijie and Yumo, please let bygones be bygones and help me get through this." Huang Song's action was beyond their expectations, but they could also feel Huang Song's seriousness and sincerity, so they naturally didn't dare to be negligent. "Yes." Huang Song had just walked out of the study. At this moment, he led the 2 of them into the study again. The three of them had a secret discussion for several hours. When they left, Fengju and Qingjing walked side by side halfway. Qingjing said, "My lord has indeed improved. If it had been earlier, the situation would have been much better." As the lord, Huang Song could take the initiative to admit his mistakes. He admitted that he had previously shielded the Yuanchu's generals, causing the civil and military forces to lose balance. The Yuanchu was Huang Song's family after all. Asking him to admit this was a mistake was tantamount to slapping his own face. Yet, he admitted it, which made Qingjing look at him in a higher light. Unfortunately, it was not so easy to extinguish the bad atmosphere brought about by Yuan Xin. Although Nia Sun did not say it, he had a lot of objections. "That's true, it's still a little too late," Fengju said. "Qingyun still has a grudge in his heart. I'm afraid it won't be resolved in a few days." He folded his hands in his sleeves, looking calm and relaxed. There was even a faint smile on his lips, as if he was not worried about this at all. Qingjing said, "Qingyun is a true gentleman. If my lord is honest with him, he will definitely be able to untie the knot in your heart." Fortunately, Nia Sun was a gentleman. Even if he had resentment in his heart, he would not do anything to hurt his lord. If it were Qiguan Rang or Yang Si, what if they tried it? They could stab their lord to death in minutes. The biggest difference between them and other counselors was their thinking. Traditional counselors were particular about loyalty. They were loyal to their lord. They would spontaneously put their lord on a pedestal and put themselves in a lower position. They would often spoil their lord to the point of no return. Non-mainstream counselors were particular about following one's heart. Their lord was just a boss. To them, being a counselor was just a job. They did not have to cling to their job for the sake of a good-for-nothing boss. If they were not satisfied with their job, they could just jump ship and find another one. If their lord was not satisfied, they could just stab another one to death. It was such a simple matter. There was no need to seek death. Therefore, in the previous life, Qiguan Rang killed his old lord, Prince Changshu. In this life, Yang Si jumped ship from Prince Changshu's side and even schemed against him. Huang Song was lucky enough to meet Nia Sun, so he was still safe for now. If the public relations following the crisis were done well, the ruler and his official would be able to return to normal. The two of them walked side by side for a while until Huang Song's residence was far behind them. There was no one around. Qingjing asked, "Lu Shi is coming in full force. I'm afraid he won't be easy to deal with." Fengju tilted his head and smiled faintly, but his eyes were cold. If Lu Shi is easy to deal with, the Tsing-Yi army, the Red Lotus Group, the northern borderline, the Meng family of Zhangzhou, and Su Bei from Zhe County, they lost too unjustly. This person could successively defeat his enemies and achieve victory. He rose to power by stepping on the corpses of thousands of enemies. How could he be easy to deal with? What made Fengju even more frustrated was another matter. He had not heard any news of the Feng family's official counselors taking sides. The Feng family's disciples stayed in Xiangyang County peacefully. What did this mean? Either the Feng family felt that the situation in the world was still unclear and that it was not a good time to choose a side. Or the Feng family had already made a decision, so they had not made any moves. If it was the former, Fengju was not worried. If it was the latter, it meant that the Feng family thought highly of Jiang Pingji. That was why no one from the Feng family became an official. It was because Jiang Pingji already had Feng Jin, who was of noble birth. If another person from the Feng family came under her banner, it would inevitably give Jiang Pingji, who had a strong personality, the misconception that the Feng family wanted to infiltrate and seize power. It would be detrimental to the interests of the family. The aristocratic families had different ways of dealing with different feudal lords. If it was a lord with a strong personality and was arbitrary, the aristocratic families would take the initiative to avoid her and maintain a safe distance. Chapter 12:21. Fighting for the most advantageous situation in different environments was their way of survival for many years. The Feng family was the same, but they saw it more clearly and were more decisive in making their choices. According to Feng Ju's understanding of the family, this matter was most likely settled. Qing Jing suddenly asked him, "Actually, there's always something I don't understand." Feng Ju tilted his head and looked at him. "What is it?" Qing Jing said, "Why did Huijie assist the Lord in the beginning? Was it because of the friendship of youth?" Master Qiguan could not understand why Wei Ci wanted to be Jiang Pingji's strategist. Qing Jing also could not understand why Feng Ju followed Huang Song. Huang Song trusted Feng Ju so much, and Feng Ju treated Huang Song the same way. Everything had a reason. Everything had a reason, didn't it? Feng Ju was speechless in his heart. Friendship of youth. It shouldn't be considered. When Feng Jin brought the pregnant Wei Jingxian to Shangjing as a hostage, Feng Ju, the mischievous child, also followed them. Because he was bored, he wandered around and coincidentally met Huang Song, who was on patrol in Shangjing. He helped Feng Ju out of trouble and they got to know each other. Up until the earthquake in Shangjing, Feng Ju had only known Huang Song for 3 to 4 months. How deep a friendship of youth could there be in 3 to 4 months? Qing Jing saw through Feng Ju's gaze and asked, "Why is that? Have you ever thought about what you want to do?" Feng Ju asked in return, "Something that won't make you lose interest quickly." Qing Jing was puzzled. "What do you mean?" Feng Ju seemed to be narcissistic. "Ever since I could remember, I have shown talent that others can't match. I learn everything very quickly. When I completely learned it, I felt how boring it was to repeat it day after day. Even my life became barren. Wasn't it a waste of time to do nothing?" My elder brother disapproved of Ju's actions and often reprimanded and reminded me. Later, when I met the Lord, my second brother harbored a deep prejudice against me. The earthquake in Dongqing and the country was not about to collapse. At that time, I saw a different ambition in the Lord. He saw an ambition that even Huang Song himself had not discovered. It was this little bit of ambition that allowed him, whose life was as barren as a desert, to see the hope of an oasis. Feng Ju had deliberately set things up and pushed Huang Song from behind the scenes to the front of the stage, allowing him to rise higher and higher and be envied by others. He had also caused him to suffer a heavy blow when he was full of himself. He was suspected and even frozen by the Dongqing emperor, allowing the bud called ambition to completely sprout. Feng Jin didn't like Huang Song. He thought that Huang Song was of low birth and that Huang Song had an ulterior motive for getting close to Feng Ju. He thought that Huang Song was restricted by his birth and that he wouldn't be able to become someone great. Since that was the case, Feng Ju decided to do the opposite. What could be more challenging than raising a son of heaven? Even though this was a huge project, Feng Ju still had a lot of fun. In a sense, both Jiang Pingji in her previous life and Huang Song in this life were pitiful to have met such a terrible strategist. Qing Jing listened in silence for a while and finally understood what Feng Ju wanted to express. He looked at Feng Ju with a complicated gaze. If Qiguan Rang and Yang Si were non-mainstream strategists, then Feng Ju was a naughty child strategist. He was far more self-willed than the former. He secretly felt sorry for his lord. Feng Ju's voice was flat. Assisting the Lord is what I want to do. I won't lose interest in it soon. He did not have the perseverance and faith of Han Yu and the others who tirelessly pursued Tao. He only followed his heart and nature. I can do whatever I want, no one else can control me. Yes, he was so willful. Qing Jing was speechless. Sigh, I'd better feel sorry for my lord. Huang Song's 2 days of self-reflection were still effective. It was definitely not as simple as what he said. Instead, he seriously put it into practice. However, the disharmony between the civil and military officials was already very serious. It was not something that could be resolved with a few words. It still needed a heavy dose of medicine. Huang Song deeply understood the contradictions among the people and complained incessantly. The tears that flowed from his eyes were all the water that had poured into his brain back then. The crux of the problem of the disharmony between the civil and military officials still lay with Huang Song. As long as he, the Lord, was impartial, the atmosphere below would naturally be purged. For this reason, Huang Song specially created a public relations crisis. He set up a banquet and invited the civil and military officials to attend. At the banquet, Huang Song took advantage of his drunkenness. His eyes were red, and he bitterly reflected on his mistakes. At the same time, he played the sad card, creating a sad atmosphere of being surrounded by strong enemies and hidden dangers within. He did not criticize others. Instead, he blamed himself and took all the blame that did not belong to him. Everyone in the tent blushed when they heard this and began to reflect on themselves. Huang Song was also an award-winning actor. He sang, recited, acted, and performed a set of punches. The effect was better than expected. After that, he repeatedly beat them, and the atmosphere was refreshed. There was not much time left for Huang Song. Jiang Pingji would recuperate for a few more months at most. The earliest would be next spring, and the latest would be next autumn's harvest. Huang Song was like a student who had wasted a winter and summer vacation. He only worked hard overnight to finish his homework when school was about to start. Even if he finished his homework on time, his learning efficiency was not as good as that of a well-behaved student with a solid foundation. As the most powerful vassal in Dongqing, Jiang Pingji's every move would inevitably attract the attention of her neighbors. Needless to say, Huang Song was now hiding in his own territory and quietly growing stronger, waiting for a good opportunity. Another neighbor, separated by Zhangjiang Pass, was also secretly observing her. On one hand, she eliminated the hidden dangers within, and on the other hand, she paid attention to the enemy's movements. Cough, cough, cough. If there's any news in the future, continue to pass it to me. After Niel Yang finished speaking, Wei Dan brought up the medicine that was just the right temperature. He stared at Niel Yang and drank it all. Wei Dan said, "Okay." Niel Yang drank the bitter medicine and coughed for a while. It took him a while to recover. His bloodshot eyes were watery. I knew Lu Shi was a disaster, but I didn't expect him to break through in a desperate situation. He has become a troublesome person now. Wei Dan said, "This is not surprising. Zixiao has his eyes on her after all. If she did not have the potential to win, why would Wei Ci choose her? Which vassal in troubled times did not climb up by stepping on the bones of their enemies?" Niel Liang's eyes were as cold as the cold moonlight, flashing with rays of light. There were many hidden dangers in the Nie family, and he had already thought of ways to deal with them. He had no ambition and was not keen on power. Originally, Niel Liang only wanted to assist the head of the Nie family to ascend to the throne, but it was different now. If he did not seize it now, could he watch helplessly as the Nie family's foundation was destroyed by a group of people blinded by greed? The Nie family seemed to be at the height of its power, but in fact, it was going downhill. According to his understanding of Jiang Pingji, this woman's ambition would never be satisfied with just Dongqing. The Nie family, or Zhongzhao, was also a piece of meat that she coveted. If Niel Yang wanted to protect the Nie family, he had to fight for it and seize it. As long as he was the final victor, the Nie family would be safe. Cough, cough. Zixuan, my mouth is a little bitter. Help me get some candied plums, of course, he had to recuperate before that. The situation of the world was like the clouds in the sky, moving when the wind blew and calming when the wind stopped. Jiang Pingji led her troops to stir up the forces in the south of Dongqing. After she was done, she returned home in glory with spoils of war and fruits. It's another year. What should we eat for this year's New Year's banquet? Chapter 12:22. Xie sighed and said, "The people here are so enthusiastic, countless people lined the road to welcome them. Warm handkerchiefs, sachets, and sachets fell like raindrops." Xie was stunned and sighed with emotion. He was young, strong, and had a strong recovery ability. His heavy injury was almost healed, and now he was full of vigor again. Although he was a surrendered general, Jiang Pingji didn't give him any special treatment. The other people didn't know which general was which. They would throw sachets and handkerchiefs to whoever was wearing powerful armor, who was good-looking, and who had an extraordinary temperament. Xie relied on his beautiful face that was gifted by his parents to swindle a lot of sachets and colorful handkerchiefs. His popularity was not much lower than Li Yun's. Tut, this cruel world that was heartless and only cared about looks. Seeing that this group of young people was so impressive and popular, Yang Si felt sour in his heart. Thinking back to those years, he was also flushed with success and was the ideal husband in the hearts of countless beautiful ladies. Yang Si twirled his neatly trimmed beard and showed some sadness on his face. "Wenbin, do you think I'm really old?" He touched his face secretly. It felt good. In the words of the audience in the streaming room, it was full of collagen. Han Yu was riding on a horse and silently looked at the people who were welcoming them. Everyone's face was filled with enthusiasm, respect, and joy from the bottom of their hearts. It reminded him of when he was young, when the emperor of Dongqing went out to worship the heavens, and the government runners forced the people to come out to cheer and kneel to welcome the emperor. When he compared the memory of his youth with the scene in front of him, he could immediately tell which one was real. Before he could recover from his memories, a few yellow sachets were thrown at him in a daze. Looking in the direction of the flying traces, he saw a few pretty girls boldly expressing their love to him. Han Yu blushed. Yang Si happened to disturb him again, and Han Yu got rid of the awkward atmosphere. Han Yu said bluntly, "Do you think you are very young?" If Yang Si was a few years older, he would be old enough to be a grandfather. Men are 31 flowers. Of course, I am young. Although Yang Si's age could be rounded up to 4, he looked like he was in his early 30s just by looking at his appearance. Han Yu glanced at Li Yun, Xie, and the other little fresh meats, who had received so many flowers that their hands were sore. He then looked at the old bacon, Yang Si, and smiled without saying a word. Yang Si, *********, it was one thing for Han Yu to crush the two armies, but now that they were on the same side, why was Han Yu still against him? Yang Si had an ominous premonition. Could it be that he wouldn't be able to turn things around in the future? The cheers of the people were like a tsunami. Han Yu looked at her back and tightened his grip on the reins. In a trance, he seemed to see the other party wearing a dragon robe, walking up the stairs step by step. Perhaps she was the final destination. Han Yu smiled faintly. He seemed to be influenced by the enthusiasm of the people around him, and his mood became more and more joyful. Feng Zhen, Feng Jin, and the others had been waiting for a long time. Each of them craned their necks, waiting for the army to appear. He's here, my lord, and the others are back." Seeing the commotion in the crowd from afar, the long-awaited army slowly appeared in sight. The second floor of the streets on both sides of the street was filled with onlookers. Most of them had only heard of Jiang Pingji's name, but they had never seen her in person. No matter how famous she was in the outside world, if they didn't see her with their own eyes, it would be unrealistic. Is the woman leading the army the Duke of Lanting? A certain scholar tried hard to control his manners. He couldn't be like those ordinary people who leaned against the window and stretched half of his body out, but he couldn't help but stretch his neck. After taking a look, he said, "She's indeed not an ordinary woman." Jiang Pingji was wearing the improved clothes for women. She looked crisp and elegant, and she would definitely become a fashion vane in Wanzhou. If she's an ordinary woman, what would Su Bei from Zhe County be? Another scholar said with a smile, "I thought the Duke of Lanting would be a strong and sturdy woman with dark skin like a boar." Looking at her now, it seems that although her appearance isn't stunning, it's not bad either. Many people had heard of Jiang Pingji's deeds. An image of a strong and sturdy man appeared in their minds. Who would have thought that she would be considered a beauty? I heard that the Duke of Lanting hasn't gotten married yet. I wonder what kind of man would be able to catch her eye. It can't be you or me. That's strange. Why hasn't the Duke of Lanting gotten married yet? Her knees are so shabby that it makes people anxious. Yes, anxious. Wei Xi's policy of public opinion was still useful. The school of novels had also flourished in the past few years. There were storytellers on the streets and alleys, in restaurants and tea houses. Every day, people would bring small stools to listen to the stories. In the past few years, the territory under her rule was filled with brainless fans who sang praises of Jiang Pingji. Even though many scholars were quite critical of her identity as a woman, after staying in Wanzhou for a long time, they were unknowingly brainwashed. Before coming to Wanzhou, this was what they thought. She was just a woman. She could be glorious for a lifetime, but she would eventually marry, have children, and retire. After coming to Wanzhou, this was what they thought. How could my Duke of Lanting be so handsome, so beautiful, so wise, so powerful, so unparalleled in the world? They were frantically cheering for the Duke of Lanting. A new scholar who had just arrived opened his mouth. Maybe she has some unspeakable illness. Besides, which man would want such a rebellious woman? As soon as he finished speaking, he attracted a dozen unfriendly gazes from the tea house. Someone retorted and mocked, "What a joke. A great hero like the Duke of Lanting should have carefully selected the best in the world. There are countless men and women in Wanzhou who are waiting for her favor. You are all frogs in a well. What you said just now is really hilarious." The new scholar's face turned green and white. He couldn't stay any longer, so he simply flicked his sleeves and left. When he went downstairs, he saw a few figures in blue and white holding onto the handrails as they went up to a private room on the second floor. Wow! So impressive, Sun Lan was wearing the blue and white school uniform of the Golden Scale Academy. She had 2 blue bags slung across her shoulders. There were a few books in the bags. According to normal times, they should still be in class at the Golden Scale Academy. However, the children wanted to see the world, so they begged their parents to apply for an hour's leave from the academy and came to watch the fun. Sun Lan and Qiguan Jinghui used both hands to lean against the window. They widened their eyes and carefully searched for their target. "Jinghui, that's Uncle Qiguan." Sun Lan's eyes were bright, and he immediately found his target. Qiguan Jinghui looked in the direction he was pointing, and her eyes suddenly lit up. "Daddy, Daddy," she called out in the direction of the crowd, but the cheers around her were too loud and completely drowned out her voice. Seeing this, Qiguan Jinghui pouted. Sun Lan raised a hand and patted her shoulder. "You'll see Uncle later. Jinghui, don't be disappointed or sad." Chapter 12:23. Ha! The child beside Jinghui is a student of the Golden Scale Academy, right? Which school is he from? Qiguan Rang waved his fan, his brows furrowed in displeasure. Wanzhou was liberal, but that didn't mean that other people's boys could touch their daughters. Most scholars in ancient times were short-sighted. It wasn't high, but it wasn't as good as a general's. Qiguan Rang could recognize Qiguan Jinghui, but he couldn't tell who the boy beside her was. Lian glanced at him and said, Master Sun's grandson is called Sun Lan. He still remembered that Sun Lan was an introverted and shy boy, but now he was much more outgoing. Sun Zidao's grandson. So it's him. When Jiang Pingji sent troops to Mengzhan, Qiguan Rang was in charge of Chongzhou and assisted Sun Wen in governing Beizhou, Beijiang. He often heard Sun Wen talk about his grandson, so he had an impression of him. Lian smiled and said, the children have a good relationship. The parents' generation had a good relationship, so they naturally hoped that the next generation would get along well. If nothing unexpected happened, these children would be the cornerstone of the future. If they had a good relationship, it wouldn't be easy to have disagreements. Qiguan Rang snorted coldly and didn't comment. Lian saw that he was unhappy, but he couldn't think of anything that had angered Qiguan Rang, so he could only keep his mouth shut. Jinghui, your father is looking over here. Sun Lan saw Qiguan Rang looking over and waved his hands excitedly. Chongqing glanced around and saw Liyun. She turned to the chubby girl in Sheng Wanwan's arms and said, Nuanyuan, your father is over there. The chubby girl was Liyun's eldest daughter. She was named Lin Wan, and her nickname was Nuanyuan. She lived up to her name. She was always smiling and would laugh at whoever teased her. Her smile was warm and clean, and she rarely cried. Chongqing and the others liked her very much when they first saw her. Nuanyuan was at the age where she liked to babble. The first word she learned was father. Hearing the familiar pronunciation, she immediately turned to look at Chongqing. She smiled, revealing her red gums and 2 or 3 white teeth. Father. Father, Sheng Wanwan tapped the tip of Nuanyuan's nose with her finger and said, Daddy will be able to see it when he comes back. The window isn't high, so it's not safe to approach it. Chongqing's children were not tall, so they would be fine if they leaned against the window. However, it would be different if she carried Nuanyuan close to the window. Nuanyuan did not know what Sheng Wanwan was talking about. Instead, she opened her mouth and sucked on Sheng Wanwan's fingertip. The atmosphere in the private room was harmonious and relaxed, but the atmosphere outside was still high. Master, Jiang Pingji got off the horse and threw the reins to the soldiers. Feng Jin and Feng Zhen, who had been waiting for a long time, went forward to welcome her. Qing Yuan was also there, but his cheeks were thinner than before, and his chin was sharper. Thank you for your hard work. Jiang Pingji raised her hands and helped them up. It's not hard at all. It's part of my duty to share my lord's burden. It was not a place for them to chat and reminisce about the past. Jiang Pingji returned to the manor and sent people to disperse the people who had gathered together in an orderly manner. Because they were tired from the long journey, Jiang Pingji considerately asked everyone to go back to the manor and rest for a while. The rest of the matters could be discussed the next day. Han Yu and Xie Zhe were both newly surrendered. It was reasonable to say that they had no property in Wanzhou. However, Jiang Pingji had already sent people to bring their families to Wanzhou in advance. The manor and residences had already been prepared. Xie Zhe returned to the manor under the guidance of a servant. From afar, he saw his wife waiting at the gate with her servants. He was very excited. He had been mentally prepared to die on the battlefield and be separated by life and death. He had never thought that there would be a day when they would be reunited again. When a husband and wife met, they naturally had a lot to talk about. Compared to the harmonious and sweet relationship between the husband and wife, the other couple was a little cold. Han Yu and his wife were considered a young couple. They knew each other very well. He could tell at a glance whether his wife treated him sincerely or perfunctorily. Her husband had just escaped from death. Even if she didn't welcome him warmly, she should at least ask about his well-being. However, his wife didn't even bother to put on a show. Thinking about what Wei Si had said earlier, Han Yu felt very upset. "Does my wife resent your husband?" Han Yu asked softly. Mrs. Han had a dignified demeanor. There was not a single flaw on her body. She was as perfect as an exquisite porcelain doll. "I am more than happy that you have come back safely. Why would I resent you?" Mrs. Han smiled and turned around to order the servant girls. She asked the servants to prepare hot water and clean clothes for Han Yu. At the same time, she asked the concubines from the backyard to come out and serve Han Yu. Han Yu didn't take any concubines after his marriage. However, he had 2 servant girls who served him before his marriage. Mrs. Han generously accepted them and even raised their status. Not only did she treat the concubines well, but she also took good care of the sons of the concubines. They were so perfect that there was no fault to be found. Seeing this, Han Yu could only sigh. "My wife, why don't we have a talk?" Han Yu said. Mrs. Han seemed to be surprised. She asked him in reply, "Talk about what?" Han Yu choked and didn't know how to continue the conversation. He could see that his wife was dissatisfied and even resentful. However, she denied it, so he couldn't force her. "Nothing. Master Yuanjing is here now. As his disciple, I should pay him a visit." Mrs. Han smiled. "If that's the case, I will help you prepare. It's rude to come empty-handed." Han Yu could only stare at her. When Mrs. Han was about to walk out of the door, he said, "Although the Duke of Lanting is a woman, she is also an outstanding person. She is no worse than the Duke of Xinzhou." In Han Yu's eyes, Jiang Pingji was certainly no worse than Su Pei, but she still had to say what she had to say. "Lang Jun is the head of the family. I am just a woman from the backyard. Why are you telling me this?" Mrs. Han maintained a perfect smile on her face, but she was unhappy in her heart. First, she was sent to Wanzhou as a captive. Although he didn't neglect or offend her, it still bothered her and made her feel bad. She thought that Han Yu would rather die than surrender. He might not imitate Qing Sun, but he wouldn't surrender to Lu Shi easily. She didn't expect that Han Yu would surrender to a new master so easily. Moreover, the new master was not close to the gentry but friendly to the poor. Han Yu's surrender to Lu Shi became a joke among the gentry in Zhe County, which made her feel even more ashamed. That feeling turned into resentment, but she buried it deep in her heart and didn't want to talk about it with others. Han Yu really didn't have a good eye. That day, every household was not peaceful. Li Yun went home, hugged his daughter and kissed his wife. He was so happy that he looked like a fool. Before the banquet started, the gatekeeper outside the house announced that a guest had arrived. "Who is it?" The gatekeeper said, "The guest claims to be from the Xie family." Li Yun suddenly remembered who it was and heard a clang. His father, Xie Qian, was so shocked that he dropped his chopsticks on the table. The Xie family. Xie Qian was surprised. Chapter 12:24. Xie Zhe solemnly asked his wife to prepare a generous gift and brought his family to visit. However, he came at a bad time. Li Yun's family had just finished their meal. It wasn't that Xie Zhe didn't understand etiquette, but Li Yun's family accommodated Sheng Wanwan and their precious Lin Wan, who worked in the government office, during mealtime. Xie Zhe told his wife about eldest uncle Xie Qian. His wife was also shocked. Although Xie Qian was from the previous generation, his position in the Xie family was special. After his accident, his courtyard in the Xie manor was sealed and no one had the right to live in it. It was a courtyard with excellent feng shui. When Xie's wife married, she asked about it out of curiosity and found out about Xie Qian. Lang Jun, is that really eldest uncle? Madame Xie sat by his side and waited. Her gentle black eyes carried a tinge of surprise. I heard from the old servant that first uncle had already. This is Commandant Li Yun's mansion. How could first uncle be here? Although Xie brought her to see Xie Qian and his respect warmed her heart, she was afraid that her husband would be deceived. Xie had just surrendered and needed to bide his time. Ever since Xie's wife arrived in Wanzhou, she had been living in the backyard and didn't dare to move around casually. She was afraid that she would accidentally anger the original nobles in Wanzhou. In the end, not only did she not help her husband, she even dragged him down. Xie raised his hand and patted the back of her hand to comfort her. I have confirmed that Hanmei's biological father is eldest uncle, Xie said. Although eldest uncle has been removed from the Xie family, his bloodline can't be severed. As juniors, we naturally have to take the initiative to visit. We can't forget basic etiquette in front of uncle. Xie comforted his wife, but his heart was beating like a drum. He was so nervous that his palms were sweating. His hearing was excellent and he acutely heard light footsteps approaching from afar. Martial artists all had the ability to lift their qi and lighten their bodies. Therefore, the higher their level of cultivation, the lighter their footsteps and the more stable their lower body. If it were an ordinary person, their footsteps would be heavy, loud, and deep. Xie had a vague guess and stared unblinkingly in the direction of the sound. Not long after, a scholarly man dressed in a dark green robe entered his line of sight. This person's appearance was somewhat similar to Li Yun's. However, Li Yun had been on expeditions all year round, so there was always a bloodthirsty and sharp aura around him, along with a hot-bloodedness that could not be ignored. This middle-aged man, however, was different. His elegant bearing gave people a favorable impression. His brows were gentle, and his facial features were even more refined and elegant. If it wasn't for his lower body being stable and breathing, Xie would have thought. Eldest uncle. It's really eldest uncle. Xie was dumbfounded. It took him a while to recover and solemnly bowed. Seeing this, Xie's wife also bowed in respect. Xie Qian frowned at the young couple and got up to help them up. There are no outsiders here, there's no need to do this. Xie smile. Xie. Uncle, Xie smiled. This is the first time I brought a relative to see you. I can't miss out on this gift. Even if they were a family, they couldn't be rude. Xie Qian said, I heard from Hanmei that you're second brother's fifth son. I haven't seen you for a few years and you've grown up. Xie said, eldest uncle, you can call me Yuangue. Yuangue. Xie Qian's expression froze. Your father gave you this name. Say. It had rules and a role model. It was a good name, but when read, it was such a coincidence. Yes, father gave it. He even said that it took him a long time to choose. If eldest uncle was still here, with his literary talent, he wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. Xie didn't realize what was wrong until he realized it. He asked Xie Qian anxiously, eldest uncle, is there something wrong with this name? Or did I accidentally offend someone's taboo? Xie Qian smiled. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that the pronunciation is misleading. Xie didn't understand. Xie Qian didn't tease Xie. As soon as he saw Xie, he knew that he was a straightforward person like many of the Xies. Honest people were also innocent. It was better not to bully them. There's an object in the carpentry workshop called a compass. It's the word for circle and the word for regulation. It's used to make things and seems to be an indispensable tool in the carpentry workshop. I only heard about it recently and may have misunderstood it. I hope you won't hold it against me. With that, CSA understood. So his name and tool had been pronounced with the same pronunciation. He was a broad-minded person. There were many people in the world with the same name or character. It wasn't a big deal. Little did he know that CSA's character had made him the most famous general of this era. Students couldn't memorize famous people in history, but when compass was mentioned, they couldn't help but think of CSA. CSA said, "If I can make Uncle happy, it doesn't matter if I misunderstood." Xie Qian smiled gently at him. As expected of a direct descendant of the Xies, he always liked to play straight and didn't know how to beat around the bush. Although he had given up on returning to the clan, he couldn't remain indifferent when he met the Xies descendants many years later. He asked about his relatives with concern, and CSA answered them one by one. Before Xie Qian could sigh, a meatball suddenly rolled in from outside. "Grandpa, Nuanyuan." Xie Qian, who had a granddaughter complex, was so scared that his voice changed. The servant who was serving Nuanyuan followed behind. Seeing her face down on the ground, she was scared out of her wits. Probably because she had more fat on her body, the fall didn't hurt. Nuanyuan propped herself up with her arms and shook her little head, as if trying to wake herself up. She refused the maid's help and slowly climbed up. Her body swayed like a plump penguin as she moved toward Xie Qian. Xie Qian was already in front of her. She stretched out her arms to hold his legs. After she steadied herself, she stretched out her right hand and opened her little claws. In her palm lay a very, very small pig-head snack that she had squeezed until it was deformed. "Grandpa, eat." Nuanyuan wasn't fluent in speech. She only knew a few words. Although she was young, she had inherited her father's straightforward and generous personality. She loved to share with others. If she thought something was delicious, she liked to leave a portion to share with her mother or grandfather. As for Li Yun, after being away for so long, Nuanyuan, who was only a little over a year old at the time, had no impression of him. Her ability to call him Daddy was taught well by her relatives and servants. Li Nuanyuan was good-looking. She looked a little like Li Yun and Sheng Wanwan, but more like her grandmother, Wang Huiyun. Chapter 12:25. All right, Grandpa, eat." Xie Qian didn't mind that the pastry pig had been squeezed out of shape and sucked the sweat from his palms. Instead, he ate it with a kind expression. CSA asked curiously, "Is this cousin's daughter?" The Xie family had always had more males than females, with more males than females. CSA's generation only had 2 sisters, the rest were just servants. In the Xie family, male children were abundant, while female children were rare. "Yes, her name is Lin Wan, her nickname is Nuanyuan." Xie Qian picked up the plump Nuanyuan. She was staring at CSA with her black grape-like eyes, as if she was wondering when a strange uncle had come to her house. "Nuanyuan, call him uncle." Nuanyuan was a beat slower and mumbled the words, then giggled and buried her head in Xie Qian's neck, as if she was shy. The cute little angel's call was like a sharp sword piercing through CSA's chest, making his limbs go numb. He was touched by her cuteness. Cousin was indeed cousin, even his daughter was so outstanding. She was indeed a descendant of the Xie family. Oh right, CSA didn't seem to have given up on the idea of having Li Yun acknowledge his ancestors. He couldn't move Li Yun, so he tried Xie Qian. After all, he was a descendant of the Xie family. How could he change his family name? If he changed his family name, it would be difficult for the Xie family to protect Li Yun in the future. Xie Qian had a change of heart. On the surface, he rejected CSA's good intentions. It was better to let Li Yun continue to be a Li. Xie Zhe couldn't even deal with Li Yun, let alone Xie Qian's thoughts. It was already good enough that he hadn't been led into a ditch. Lin Wan, is this your name? Xie Zhe was surprised. Men often named themselves with a single character, using a double character as a base. Women used a double character, avoiding a single character. Of course, this was only for those who were particular about it. If the common people had a decent name, it would be great. Why would they be afraid of single and double characters? For example, Li Yun's childhood nickname was Li Gozhu. Not just Gozhu, but many people also named him Tai Dan, Sha Dan, Xuanzi, and the like. It was good enough to have a name that people could call, why would they be particular about it? Xie Qian said, the trend in Wanzhou has been like this in recent years. I'm afraid that Nuanyuan will also walk the path of a military general in the future. Taking a double name sounds too soft. Even though Xie Qian could not imagine the scene of Nuanyuan, who looked like his wife, Wang Huiyun, wielding a knife and a gun, it was a family tradition, so he had to learn it. In the entire Xie clan, there was no need to talk about the male clansmen, as they had been beaten since they were young. The female clansmen also had to learn some martial arts. Nuanyuan's surname was Li, but she still had the blood of the Xie family flowing in her veins. Naturally, she could not abandon the family inheritance. Xie Zhe thought of his lord's name, Lu Shi, and immediately understood who had started the trend of women taking single characters. Xie Zhe's wife was shocked. She couldn't imagine what her uncle was thinking. He actually wanted Li Nuan to grow up and become a general to kill enemies. Uncle, swords have no eyes on the battlefield, Nuanyuan, Xie Qian said, Wanzhou has a complete system for female soldiers. If Nuanyuan wants to go to war, she'll probably start from the bottom. She won't face danger head-on. She had to train her courage first before killing the enemy to earn military merits. Although Xie Qian spoiled his granddaughter, he did not spoil her inappropriately. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that Xie Qian had trained Li Nuan as the legitimate heir. None of the heirs of the Xie clan are useless. Although Nuanyuan is young, she is full of intelligence. It would be a pity if we don't teach her well. Nuanyuan didn't know what the adults were talking about. She only knew that they were all good-looking. She was well-behaved and entertained herself. Sometimes she pulled Xie Qian's sleeve, and sometimes she entertained herself. She giggled without crying or making a fuss. Which couple wouldn't like such a beautiful little angel? They liked her so much that they couldn't wait to give birth to a daughter who was as well-behaved and obedient as Nuanyuan. Compared to the harmony in the Li residence, Han Yu's situation was a bit awkward. He had wanted to take his wife to see Master Yuanjing. Han Yu had always respected Master Yuanjing as a father. Now that he was taking his wife to see Master Yuanjing, the meaning was obvious. He tried his best to ease the relationship between husband and wife, but Mrs. Han was stubborn and arrogant, so it didn't work. Mrs. Han politely declined Han Yu's proposal. Instead, she urged Han Yu to leave the house as soon as possible with the excuse that it was getting late. Paying a visit to someone's home was also very particular. The most basic etiquette was not to suddenly visit the host while the host was eating. Han Yu looked at the sky and decided to visit Master Yuanjing's house alone with a generous gift. Most of Jiangpingji's people were gathered in one place. Although Master Yuanjing wasn't one of them, he was still assigned a house in a good location. Han Yu's house was only 2 streets away from Master Yuanjing's house, so it wouldn't take much time to get there. Han Yu's face darkened. Even if Mrs. Han didn't say it out loud, she was very thorough in her work. But Han Yu was her husband who shared the same bed with her. How could he not understand? Han Yu could see that Mrs. Han's attitude towards Master Yuanjing was distant and arrogant. That made Han Yu very angry. Master Yuanjing became famous because he defeated the northern borderline and took back the 3 cities. He became a famous man in the 5 kingdoms. Once he became famous, people would dig into Master Yuanjing's past. His ancestors had been prominent nobles during the 16 Kingdoms period, but after 2 generations, they were punished for their words and fell into dire straits. In Master Yuanjing's generation, the whole family was so poor that they only had a genealogy book. To be honest, Master Yuanjing's starting point was even lower than the common scholars from poor families. The scholars from poor families included the common nobles, the local gentry, and the nouveau riche. They didn't have power or influence, but they had money. Even if he was famous and had students all over the world, he was not a great person in the eyes of the old and stubborn gentry. Han Yu saw his wife's carelessness and neglect, which made him even angrier. "Brother Wenbin, you are finally here." Tang Yao, who had been wandering outside for a long time, hurried to greet Han Yu. "Master knew that I would come." Tang Yao said, "Master said that Brother Wenbin pays attention to etiquette and will definitely come today." People in the world paid attention to respecting their masters. There was a saying, "A master for a day is a father for a lifetime." Visiting Master Yuanjing was no different from visiting his father. Han Yu said, "Master is still like this." Han Yu's eyes turned red when he saw his master who he hadn't seen for many years, but he couldn't tell why he felt wronged. Master Yuanjing was comforted to see that his disciple had become so mature and steady. Master Yuanjing was not only his academic teacher, but also his life mentor. Han Yu could find his own path because of Master Yuanjing's guidance. He never hid anything from Master Yuanjing. They were like father and son who talked about everything. "There is one thing that I don't understand. Master once said that your path is to have students all over the world. Why are you trapped in Wanzhou now? Isn't this old man practicing his own Tao?" Master Yuanjing smiled and pointed at the stacks of books on the table. There were more than 20 books in each stack, and there were 5 stacks in total. These were the homework of the students of the Golden Scale Academy. The improved teaching system of the Golden Scale Academy was very effective. Compared to Master Yuanjing's previous teaching efficiency, it was like taking a rocket to the sky. There were so many students, but according to the previous standard, there were not many who were qualified to study. There was only one child prodigy like Feng Yi. Chapter 12:26. Han Yu asked for Master Yuanjing's permission. He took a few books and read them carefully. The more he read, the more shocked he became. "This," Master Yuanjing sighed. "I admire the sage's education without discrimination and teaching students in accordance with their aptitudes. I've been vigilant for many years and I dare not slack off. But I'm weak and my energy is limited. Even if I'm ambitious, I'm still not as good as the sage." Master Yuanjing advocated education for all. What did education without discrimination mean? In layman's terms, anyone could receive education. No matter if they were smart, stupid, virtuous, or unworthy, they could all eliminate their differences through education. The ambition and ideal were beautiful, but the result was heart-wrenching. Master Yuanjing was only one person. He only had one mouth and 2 hands. His lifespan was limited to that of an ordinary person. Even if he was obsessed with education, the number of students he could teach was limited, let alone enlighten the people. Because of the limited resources, Master Yuanjing's education without discrimination was also an elite education. He unconsciously tilted the educational resources to the smart students. Master Yuanjing realized this, but he was powerless to change the situation. This problem had been bothering him for a long time. It wasn't until he came to Wanzhou that he suddenly understood the crux of the problem. Instead of worrying about scarcity, he worried about inequality. Because of the shortage of educational resources, the limited resources would be tilted to the talented students to ensure the maximum benefits. Master Yuanjing made a bold assumption. What if the educational resources could be expanded until there was a surplus? Then every student would have enough educational resources. With this premise, the education without discrimination could be implemented, and the realm of teaching students in accordance with their aptitudes could be further achieved. Han Yu put down the students' homework in shock and secretly calmed himself down. Even if he didn't know much about the academy, he knew that almost all the students in the academy were commoners. They had no learning foundation or conditions. As for talent, one or two of them might be geniuses, but not everyone was a genius. Students like these, their homework was quite good. How many students are there in the Golden Scale Academy? Han Yu asked. Master Yuanjing answered, we are currently recruiting 2 batches of students. The 3rd batch is still being selected. There are a total of 356 students. Han Yu asked again, how are their grades and knowledge? Master Yuanjing smiled. Although they are not as good as Fingyi and others, they are not inferior to the children of the same age in the aristocratic families. What about talent? Most of them are mediocre and mediocre. Their only virtue is being diligent and eager to learn. Han Yu could not help but gasp when he heard that. How long had the Golden Scale Academy been established? He had already accepted 2 batches of students, a total of 356 people. Their learning speed and depth were not the slightest bit inferior to their peers who were studying in the landowning household school. This was very frightening. These students had started learning so late, their foundations were so weak, and their talents were at the level of an ordinary person. Even if they were to hang themselves from a beam, it would still be very difficult for them to catch up with the learning speed of the aristocratic families. One had to know that most of the children of landowning households started studying at the age of 3. The students of the Golden Scale Academy were 4 to 5 years behind them. They were 4 to 5 years behind, but they could barely catch up. Wasn't that terrifying? If it wasn't a problem of talent, then it was a problem of learning methods and the education system. Han Yu spotted the core with his sharp eyes. What was the purpose of this Golden Scale Academy? He could not help but ask the question in his heart. Master Yuanjing smiled but did not speak. He stood up and took out an unusually heavy booklet. The booklet was as thick as a knuckle, and the xian paper was filled with words. They were all Master Yuanjing's handwriting. Some of the words were neat, some were more random, and some were scribbled. They must have been written in a hurry. Han Yu flipped through the booklet carefully. He found that the booklet could be called the History of the Growth of the Golden Scale Academy. Every step of the reform was recorded in detail. The students were divided into classes according to their age and learning progress. The learning content was also systematically classified into subjects. The students' daily time was planned in detail. Different classes would learn different subjects at the same time, making perfect use of the master's teaching time. The content of the students' learning was also from shallow to deep. What was even more amazing was the new rhymes of Chinese, which greatly lowered the threshold of learning. Although the educational task was heavy, it was indeed clearer than the landowning household school. The learning efficiency of the two could not be compared. Any landowning household with a profound background had a special family school for the children of the family to study. However, it was only open to the same clan. As long as one was a member of the family, he or she could enjoy the educational resources. The family school sounded like a high-end thing, but in fact, it was not much different from a private school. A group of students of the same clan stayed together, regardless of age or learning progress. The master taught them in a unified way, and occasionally gave them one-on-one guidance. As a result, the students who learned fast were slowed down, and the students who had a weak foundation could not keep up with the learning progress. Naturally, their learning efficiency was not high. The landowning households who had the resources could not go to the family school. They could directly invite the great scholars or famous scholars to come to their homes for one-on-one teaching. By doing so, the learning efficiency, quality, and progress were all guaranteed, but the educational resources were wasted. A master could have taught more students, but the resources were all enjoyed by one student, who could not take care of others. Was that not a waste? That was the ineffective overflow of educational resources. The booklet written by Master Yuanjing was called an essay, but it was more like a brand new, well-organized system. The teaching resources and the students were balanced as much as possible to ensure the learning efficiency, quality, and progress of the students while benefiting more students. Han Yu flipped through the booklet. Following the content, he witnessed the system of the Golden Scale Academy from scratch, and it was gradually perfected and reasonable. Master Yuanjing did not rely on his imagination or his idealized imagination to perfect this system. Instead, he focused on the actual situation. Seeing Master Yuanjing's steady layout and planning, Han Yu felt even more ashamed of his frivolous and naive pursuit of Tao. If Jiang Pingji hadn't woken him up, he would have been stuck in a dead end. Master, you are indeed a genius in the world. I am ashamed of my inferiority. Master Yuanjing said seriously, the Golden Scale Academy from scratch is the result of the painstaking efforts of me and a few other great scholars. It is not something that can be accomplished by one person. Without the support of the Lord of Lanting and the efforts of those children, this system would not be as fruitful as it is today. Master Yuanjing's contribution was great, but it was not the greatest, and it was not his contribution alone. Han Yu knew that he had made a slip of the tongue, so he immediately apologized solemnly. Master, do you think highly of the Lord? Han Yu noticed that Master Yuanjing addressed Jiang Pingji respectfully. Chapter 12:27. The two of them talked for a while more. Master Yuanjing looked tired and Han Yu took the initiative to leave. Rest early, Master. I will visit again tomorrow, Master Yuanjing said. The war has just ended. You must be busy. Don't worry about an old man like me. You can go about your business. He asked Tang Yao to see Han Yu off. He washed up and got ready to rest. However, it was destined to be a restless night. The guard at the corner door told him that there was a guest outside. What kind of mysterious guest is this? Master Yuanjing frowned. He didn't go directly to the front door. Instead, he went to the corner door sneakily. The guard took out an object and handed it to Master Yuanjing. Master Yuanjing's pupils shrank after he saw it. Master Yuanjing turned his wrist and held the object tightly in his palm. His knuckles turned blue because of the force. Ask that person to wait for me in the study. Let him in quietly. Don't disturb the others. Master Yuanjing's expression was a little strange. After the gatekeeper left, he released his clenched fist and revealed a jade guanyin. The jade was cold. There was a tinge of blue in the green. The green was pure and strong. In the eyes of the common people, this kind of jade was not expensive. No matter how good the quality was, it couldn't be compared to other famous jade. The aristocrats would never play with this kind of cheap stuff. But Master Yuanjing knew that this kind of jade was called jade. It was said that it was the most expensive and rare imperial jade. He had learned about jadeite thanks to a young friend he had made despite the age gap. Gu Min, he murmured. Jade was very rare. It was produced in the southwest border. The local people didn't pay much attention to it. They wouldn't waste manpower to transport it to the 5 countries in the Central Plains. Only one person was interested. He happily played with the jadeite and secretly collected a lot of treasures. You don't understand. This thing will be rare in the future. If I collect it now, the future generations will definitely thank me. Only Gu Min would use jade to carve a jade Buddha. Who was the guest outside? When the guest was secretly brought in, Master Yuanjing's eyes suddenly became sharp. He stared at the person. Judging by the figure, the person was a teenager. His footsteps were heavy and messy. He probably didn't know any martial arts. The person closed the door of the study and turned to Master Yuanjing. He took off his wide hood as he walked. A delicate face was revealed after the hood was taken off. The noble aura he exuded made him look like a pampered and spoiled son of an aristocratic family. My name is Lu Zhao. Master Yuanjing. Lu Zhao. Master Yuanjing's expression didn't change, but he understood. The person who came with the jade Buddha was most likely a descendant of Gu Min. Although Lu Zhao was the son of a concubine, his real identity was the legitimate son of Gu Min and Lu Shi. Master Yuanjing faked a smile and said, "Why are you visiting me so late at night?" For a moment, countless thoughts flashed through his mind, and he looked at Lu Zhao with a measuring and scrutinizing gaze. As smart as he was, he could not think of the reason why Lu Zhao would look for him in the middle of the night. He was even more unwilling to think of a conspiracy theory. "It is," Master Lu said. "Heath Master, Yuanjing." "Master." Lu Zhao's expression was serious and his eyes were bright. There wasn't the slightest bit of frivolity in them. He said, "This matter is of great importance. I hope that you won't deny it." Master Yuanjing said, "Tell me. For the sake of your mother, I will do my best to help you." He didn't say anything. If Lu Zhao wanted to seize power, he wouldn't help him. If it was something else, of course, anything that Gu Min's family got involved with was not a small matter. Lu Zhao said, "Master, do you know that Lu Shi is not the real Lu Shi?" Master Yuanjing said calmly, "I know. But so what? Do you want me to get rid of her? She was quite capable." Monk Liaochen could see it. Of course, he could see that Jiang Pingji was extraordinary. Although reincarnating in another person's body was quite scary, it was nothing to a fraud of his level. Wei Xi's attitude and reaction were the key to his trust in Jiang Pingji. He still remembered the first time he met Gu Min and the world she described. But only Lu Shi could create such a magnificent and beautiful world. No, it should be said that he had replaced Lu Shi as an otherworldly person. If Lu Zhao wanted to go against Lu Shi, Master Yuanjing wouldn't help him, even if he was the son of an old friend. Lu Zhao shook his head and said in a low voice, "I've never had such a thought. She's my sister, and I really treat her as my sister. According to my dead mother, she's related to the fate of the world. She can't be touched. But I know who wants to touch her." Master Yuanjing was surprised. "Then why did you come today?" "It's very important to me to touch my sister's people," Lu Zhao said. "I suspect that my father, Lu Shi, has been possessed by a villain. He's plotting something big. My real sister, Lu Shi, is missing. I'm here today to ask if there's a plan that satisfies both sides." Lu Zhao was greedy. He wanted to protect everyone. Master Yuanjing's face darkened. He looked at Lu Zhao with a complicated gaze. Lu Zhao looked like Gu Min. His personality was similar. The world is the game, and the people are the pawns. You and I are pawns, but the person playing the game is the general. It's better if you don't get involved, Master Yuanjing said solemnly. Mr. Yuanjing said solemnly, "You saw what happened to the last person who tried to turn things around." Lu Zhao's body trembled. His eyes widened. Master Yuanjing heaved a long sigh. He could not help but reminisce. The world was the game, and the people were the pawns. How God cared for the people. It allowed an otherworldly person to support the dark world and lead everything in the best direction. How cruel and heartless it was. It generously helped the people, but it was stingy and ignored a mother's smallest wish. Chunin, I beg you to think of a way. Can't you have the best of both worlds? The beautiful woman held the baby girl in her arms and cried to him. Her bloodshot eyes were swollen and full of despair. I can't have my cake and eat it too. There's nothing I can do. As soon as Master Yuanjing said that, the woman cried uncontrollably. Knowing that there was a complete soul in her daughter's body, the woman's first reaction was not to be ecstatic. Instead, she was anxious and on the verge of losing control of her emotions. She knew that her daughter had dementia and no soul. In the future, this body would welcome a powerful soul and obtain a new life in the truest sense. What was the result? Her daughter was born with a complete soul. This meant that this daughter was a new life, and she was Gu Min's daughter. How could she accept that after she raised her daughter for 12 years, her body was occupied by another destined soul? That was her daughter. If she did not do that, the Jiang dynasty that should have been established would no longer exist, and the chaotic world that should have ended early would have continued. If the chaotic world continued, there would be countless lonely souls and wild ghosts. Even if the world was divided and united, the dynasty that was established was not the Jiang dynasty. Even if history would slowly develop, how long would it take to truly enter the developed modern era? 500 years or 1,000 years? The Jiang dynasty only used 300 years. When the Jiang dynasty stood at the top of the world, other places were still backward and barren. There were endless wars, and the people were ignorant and ridiculous. If the butterfly had the Jiang dynasty, there would be many more innocent souls. Chapter 12:28. Gu Min could not handle it, and neither could Lu Zhao. The former had already paid the price with his life. If the latter still wanted to challenge, he would probably end up the same way. Master Yuanjing's words made Lu Zhao look disappointed. His delicate brows were tainted with a tinge of darkness, as if his spirit had been sucked away. Looking at the face that resembled his old friend, Master Yuanjing's heart softened a little. You can try to trust Lu Shi. According to my observation, he is not someone who would kill indiscriminately without principles. He has a strong heart. Lu Zhao said blankly, there are similar words in my dead mother's handwriting. Of course I trust her, but she and my father, Lu Shi, are not the same kind of people. They both have their own plans. They obviously want to kill each other, but when they meet, they are kind and filial. I can't see any flaws. I am also puzzled. What other plans do they have in their heads? The premise of trust is honesty. His dead mother, Gu Min, and Master Yuanjing both said that Jiang Pingji was trustworthy, but she said nothing. Lu Zhao did not feel safe. He trusted Jiang Pingji, but he would not be 100% honest. He still left some leeway. No matter what they are planning, did they involve Lang Jun? Master Yuanjing tried to enlighten him. My sister did not do anything, but my father. Lu Zhao secretly gritted his teeth. A few months ago, my father planned to be a matchmaker for me to marry a hunter's daughter. I received news that the hunter's daughter is most likely the body that the real sister, Lu Shi's soul, resides in. If I marry her, isn't it going against human relations? In a panic, I could only beg concubine Dai to escape Chongzhou overnight. After thinking about it, it seemed that everything was not right. After careful investigation, I realized that there was no hunter's daughter. My previous speculations were all wrong. It was obviously a bait thrown by someone else. I exposed my identity carelessly. I'm afraid my life is on the line. Lu Zhao fleeing Chongzhou in the middle of the night was not a rational choice. Instead, he exposed himself. However, there was no turning back. He had no choice but to run to the front line to seek Jiang Pingji's protection. After saying that, Lu Zhao rubbed his eyebrows with a headache. At such a young age, he had to bear such a heavy burden and responsibility that did not belong to him. Master Yuanjing was surprised to hear that. He asked Lu Zhao about the details of Lu Shi and remained silent for a while. Lu Zhao asked nervously, "Sir, is there anything wrong?" There seems to be nothing wrong with this. Master Yuanjing regained his senses and waved his hand. There are some things that I can't tell you in detail. I'm not trying to hide it, but I'm afraid that the more you know, the more dangerous it will be. To be precise, you are the only child left of your mother. Why don't you stay out of it or ask Lu Shi for protection to ensure that you have a night of peace? If she knew about this in the underworld, she would be happy. Although Lu Zhao was very smart, his education could not keep up. No matter how talented he was, he had wasted a lot of his talent. If he had been more careful, he would not have fallen for Lu Shi's trick. It was too late to say anything now. But Lu Zhao said hesitantly, "If I stay out of it, what about father and sister?" The father and sister he was referring to were Lu Shi and the real Lu Shi. Because of Gu Min's notes and speculation, Lu Zhao suspected that Lu Shi had been possessed. He did not know that there were other inside stories. After all, the whole family was full of demons. As the only normal person, Lu Zhao was under a lot of pressure. It was understandable that he did not consider everything carefully. My mother's wish was to protect them when she was alive. I don't want to go against her will. Although Lu Zhao liked to live in a corner, his personality was very similar to Gu Min's. He treated his family with extraordinary enthusiasm. Master Yuanjing said, "You're really stubborn. Even if it means death, you're not afraid." Lu Zhao shivered. His red lips became pale and dry. Of course I'm not afraid. The Lu Zhao in front of him seemed to overlap with the woman from decades ago. "Chun-an, you can call me greedy or stupid, but I want both. This daughter is my lifeblood. I can't bear to lose her. But I also don't want history to change because of me. I can't be a sinner. I'm sure I can find the best of both worlds." In the end, Gu Min lost her life because of her greed. Betting on everything did not change a little. Master Yuanjing did not know how she died, but it was definitely not as simple as an illness. After so many years, he did not suspect Lu Shi. After all, after Gu Min's death, he went to Hu County and experienced dangerous situations. Now it seemed, everyone seemed to be hiding deep. Lu Zhao left Master Yuanjing's residence with disappointment. He put on his hood again to cover his face and sneaked out from the corner door. He did not dare to light a lamp. It would be bad if he was discovered. But, just as he went around the intersection, a slender black shadow came into view. The person was holding a long knife. He was scared out of his wits. Jiang Pingji sneered and said sarcastically, "You're so timid. How dare you go out in the middle of the night?" Lu Zhao heard the familiar voice. His squatting posture stiffened with his hands on his head. Sis, this time, not only was Lu Zhao scared out of his wits, he almost forgot how to speak human language. "Go home. Although there is no curfew in the city, it's not safe for you to be outside alone." Jiang Pingji held the war god's sword in her left hand. She put her right hand on her waist and leaned against the wall. She leaned forward a few degrees toward Lu Zhao. Ah! Lu Zhao stood up with weak legs. He glanced at the war god's sword, afraid that the blade would kiss his neck in the next second. Lu Xiao walked 2 steps behind her like a little wife. He lowered his head and looked up from time to time to see Jiang Pingji's back. That, sister. I didn't mean anything bad by looking for Master Yuanjing, Jiang Pingji snorted. I know. If you dare to reveal any of your ambitions, Master Yuanjing will look for me. Although Master Yuanjing did not make a clear statement, he was indeed on Jiang Pingji's side. Because in this world, only Jiang Pingji could help Master Yuanjing practice his way. Lu Xiao could not do it. If Lu Xiao was really ambitious, he would not be able to come up with a more valuable bargaining chip. He would not be able to persuade Master Yuanjing to change sides. He would even expose himself. Jiang Pingji also believed that Lu Xiao would not do such a stupid thing. Sister. Lu Xiao remembered what Master Yuanjing and his late mother Gu Min said. He took a deep breath and asked, I want to ask a favor of you. Jiang Pingji smiled. I refuse. Ha. Lu Xiao choked. Why? Sister, you haven't heard me out. I'm easy to talk to. As long as my life, dignity, and principles are not violated, everything is negotiable. Otherwise, there's nothing to talk about. Lu Xiao shut his mouth. He looked a little embarrassed. Jiang Pingji pressed her hand on his head and smiled. Why are you so depressed? Come, smile for me. Lu Xiao forced a smile that was uglier than crying. Don't think too much. Maybe the thing you want is not as bad as you think. Chapter 12:29. Lu Xiao was deep in thought, but he did not dare to expect too much. Jiang Pingji did not explain further. After all, it was enough for her to be clear about many things. The more people who knew, the easier it was for things to go awry. Although Lu Xiao was clever, he was still too inexperienced. Who knew if he would ruin her plans in a moment of impulse? Okay, let's go home. Oh, go home, Jiang Pingji patted his head. She smiled warmly. If Lu Xiao dared to summon the courage to look straight at her, he would have realized that Jiang Pingji's eyes were filled with warmth. It was not a simple perfunctory act. The siblings put their arms around each other's shoulders. Jiang Pingji turned her head and glanced at Lu Xiao, who was only a little taller than her. In this era, Lu Xiao was not considered short. At least he was above average. He was as tall as a pine tree. However, in Jiang Pingji's eyes, he could only be considered petite. Zhao, you rejected the marriage proposed by father. Do you have any thoughts? Sister, why did you suddenly mention this? Parents' orders and matchmakers' words. Marriage has always been decided this way. How can I make my own decisions? Lu Xiao was startled. He probed, I'm not asking for much. As long as she's good-looking and has a good personality, the most important thing was that she had to be a normal person. Important things had to be repeated 3 times. Lu Xiao did not want the person by his side to be a demon who had been possessed, a monster who was born with knowledge, or something else. It was too scary. As long as she was a normal person, he would not be picky even if she was ugly, stupid, or had a lower family background. Jiang Pingji frowned. Although marriage is decided by the elders, you are the one who will spend a lifetime with her. To put it crudely, only your own feet will know if the shoes fit. The most important thing is that you like her. Only after marriage can there be harmony. Lu Xiao was still an underage youth. Even if he was clever, his temperament was still somewhat reserved. His cheeks were slightly flushed, and his expression was somewhat unnatural. It's not that I want to decline, but I really haven't seen many. How can I like her? If it was possible, Lu Xiao really wanted to be single for the rest of his life. It was fine if his wife was obedient, but if she was restless and urged him to fight for power or play tricks in secret, wouldn't that be harming him? It was better not to marry such a troublesome wife. Jiang Pingji frowned and said, "There really aren't many decent families in Wanzhou. Why don't I go back and ask Huaiyu if there are any women of suitable age in the Feng clan? You're not young anymore. You'll be crowned in a year or two. You can't not have a marriage." Lu Xiao was shocked. Did his sister mean to make the Feng family his wife? "Sister, I'm still young. Why don't you let me stay for 2 more years?" Lu Xiao smiled and shamelessly begged for mercy, but in his heart, his palms were sweating. Letting the Feng family become the Yu family was the same as wanting him to die faster. If I get married, how can I find an excuse to ask elder sister for a red seal during festivals? This little brother doesn't have anything of value. It's already difficult for me to support myself, let alone a family. Lu Xiao racked his brains, wanting to decline. "I'm very poor now. Every day, I'm waiting for you to give me a big red seal to help me." Lu Xiao refused to give in. He shamelessly asked Jiang Pingji for this year's red seal gift in advance. "It's almost New Year's Eve. Why don't you reward me first?" Jiang Pingji was helpless against Lu Xiao. Judging from his words and actions, Lu Xiao's desire to live was extraordinarily strong. If he was allowed to live, he could live until the end of time. If he cherished his life so much, why couldn't he think of intervening in a situation he shouldn't have? Okay. We've won a few battles this year. Our income has increased a lot. Your sister isn't stingy. The red seal I gave you is not small." Jiang Pingji put her hand on Lu Xiao's shoulder and sent him back to her mansion. Lu Xiao didn't have a family and career. He didn't have a house in Wanzhou, so naturally, he could only squeeze in with her. Jiang Pingji asked someone to prepare supper for Lu Xiao so that he could eat before going to sleep. "Where's elder sister?" Lu Xiao asked her. "Tens of thousands of troops have been fighting a war for 2 years. There are still many things to deal with. I'll be busy for a while," Jiang Pingji said matter-of-factly. "If you handle these things well, the people under your rule will have a good new year. Don't worry about it, Zhao. Remember to sleep early." Lu Xiao stood in the corridor and listened to Jiang Pingji's words. His wide hood was piled on his shoulders, casting a large shadow. The candlelight there was not bright. Half of Lu Xiao's face was hidden in the shadows. He watched Jiang Pingji leave with a complicated expression. His eyes were filled with unfathomable thoughts. At some point, he sincerely wished that this person was his sister. As her younger brother, he could be proud of her. However, he knew very well that this was just his wishful thinking. Lu Xiao fell asleep with his mind full of thoughts. He didn't know that his hard-working model sister had jumped into Wei Xi's mansion with a basket of documents. She held a pen in her mouth and hung upside down under the eaves of the bedroom like a bat. She raised her hand and knocked on the window. Dong, 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 the crisp sound was especially clear in the dark night. After a while, 2 candles lit up in the pitch-black room. Wei Xi was carrying one of them as he limped towards the window. Creak, Wei Xi raised his hand and opened the window a crack. Jiang Pingji's upside-down face suddenly came into view. Wei Xi was speechless. "I don't have the energy to work overtime and stay up late alone." Jiang Pingji first put the basket on the ground, then flipped over and leaped into Wei Xi's room through the window. She then turned around and carried the basket in. "I saw that your walking posture was strange. What's wrong with you?" Jiang Pingji talked on and on, not giving Wei Xi any room to react. "I'm fine," Wei Xi sighed softly and limped into the room. He raised his hand and closed the window. What was it like to have a master with superb martial arts skills? Wei Ci felt that she would appear in front of him at any time, any place, and under any circumstances. She could stimulate him at any time and any place. Jiang Pingji carried the basket and looked down at Wei Ci's feet. Only then did she realize that there was a lump of black hanging on one of his legs. Ing. It seemed to have noticed Jiang Pingji's line of sight. The lump of shadow turned its large face and stared at her with its black pearl-like watery eyes. It made two sounds from its mouth. It used its claws to hug Wei Ci's thigh and calf, putting the weight of its entire body on this leg. It was probably a little heavy. Wei Ci could only rely on shifting when he walked, so his walking posture was a little limping. Jiang Pingji said, "You haven't fed it to death yet." She had not bothered with it since she threw it to Wei Ci. She thought that it had long been stolen and roasted by some greedy soldier. Wei Ci said, "This is the young master appointed by the Lord. How would I dare to neglect it?" It was Jiang Pingji's turn to be dumbfounded. When did she appoint a panda as the young master? Chapter 12:30. When he said this, Wei Ci's eyes sparkled with a smile, like the scattered stars in the Milky Way. Jiang Pingji clicked her tongue. She lifted the little thing up with one hand. It was obedient and timid. Its big face drooped, its semicircular ears moved, and it blinked pitifully at Jiang Pingji. "I've been raising it for a while. Why is it still so big?" She weighed it in her hand. It was heavier than before, but according to the growth pattern of an iron-eating beast, it did not make sense. Wei Ci said, "I've asked an experienced beast officer to take a look. It's very healthy." "Healthy?" Jiang Pingji said, "Tsk. It's a little thing of unknown origin. It's normal for it to not grow up. It's convenient for you to keep it." An adult iron-eating beast was almost as tall as a human when it stood up. It was also heavy and had a fierce temperament. It was not safe for Wei Ci to keep it. If it did not grow up and maintained its current appearance, there was no harm in keeping it. Jiang Pingji put it in the basket on her back. The little thing lay on the edge of the basket and poked half its head out to observe secretly. Wei Ci took the initiative to help Jiang Pingji categorize the documents so that she could deal with them. With such cooperation, the documents that would have taken most of the night were completed in 2 hours. Jiang Pingji put down her pen and shook her sore wrist. After working for so long, her eyes were sore and her stomach was hungry. It would be wonderful if a delicious meal appeared at this time. As she was thinking, the fragrance of eggs wafted into her nose. When did Zhixiao go out? Jiang Pingji looked up and saw Wei Ci holding a lantern in one hand and a bowl of egg custard with the fragrance of eggs in the other. Smelling the fragrance of the food, her mouth secreted saliva of desire. "Zhixiao knows me well. I'm starving." Wei Ci put down the plate. "I saw that you were too engrossed in your work just now, so I did not disturb you. I borrowed the small kitchen in the courtyard to make some dinner." Under the iron-eating beast's eager gaze, Jiang Pingji finished the bowl of egg custard in no time. "Zhixiao's culinary skills are too good. I really want to marry you soon." Jiang Pingji mumbled and licked her lips as if she had not had enough. Wei Ci ignored this sentence and said, "It's getting late, my lord should go back." Jiang Pingji wiped her mouth with a handkerchief and rolled onto Wei Ci's bed like a rascal. The iron-eating beast that was squatting in the basket also crawled out clumsily. It twisted its plump buttocks and rubbed against Jiang Pingji bit by bit. Jiang Pingji raised her arms and hugged it. She hugged the iron-eating beast with her left hand and lifted a corner of the blanket with her right hand. She patted the other side of the bed towards Wei Ci. Her eyes were dark and bright, making Wei Ci's ears burn. Wei Ci sighed and tightened his pajamas. He slowly moved to the bed and lay down stiffly. Zixiao's body is much better now. In the past, he always felt like a popsicle when he was in bed. Now, he finally has some warmth. Jiang Pingji rubbed her leg against Wei Si's calf. If Wei Si was a moving refrigerator, then she would be a stove that bounced around everywhere. For Wei Si, he could not warm up his bed for a long time, but she could warm him up by lying down for a while. When Jiang Pingji's bare feet touched his underwear, the temperature almost scalded him. "My lord," Jiang Pingji said, "Sai, Zixiao, you're really a gentleman." The saints also said that appetite and lust are part of human nature. It's normal for men and women to desire the opposite sex at a certain age. I see that Zixiao doesn't have a wife or a boy toy in his backyard. If you have feelings for him, do you still need to rely on yourself? Wei Si's eyes were focused on his nose and his nose was focused on his heart. He had the posture of an old monk in meditation. He lay flat on the side of the bed in a standard posture and did not move an inch. Jiang Pingji sighed in her heart. Sometimes, she could not help but doubt her own judgment. Which man could remain calm and unruffled in the face of a woman's provocation? Lixiaoyi. That did not exist. Jiang Pingji could not help but feel her hand down. Wei Si was so scared that his face turned red. "My lord," Jiang Pingji said innocently, "I'm worried about your body." Wei Si was speechless. He already had 2 children in his previous life. There was nothing to worry about. Although Wei Si looked relaxed, he actually used a great deal of willpower to restrain himself. He said, "You still have government affairs early tomorrow morning. My lord, you should rest early and recuperate." Jiang Pingji secretly rolled her eyes. Sometimes, she wished that she was not a nuisance and did not have to abide by the tens of thousands of federal rules and regulations. Delicious food was close at hand. She could eat it and chew it into pieces if she opened her mouth, but she could not do it because of her principles. Yes, sleep. She felt that, maybe Wei Si did not hold back and she was going to break her own principles. Jiang Pingji secretly carried a basket of documents back to the backyard of the government office at dawn. She pretended to have just woken up and called the maid in to freshen up. While eating breakfast, Jiang Pingji turned on the Livestream room on time. The bullet screen was full of "Good morning." Jiang Pingji pushed the door open. The golden sunlight splashed on the ground and shone on people, making them feel at ease. "Very good. Continue to be busy and try to get your annual leave as soon as possible." Jiang Pingji cheered herself on. The civil and military officials in the tent looked disinterested, but Han Yu, Xie Zhe, and Qin Gong solemnly answered, "Yes." "Haha, annual leave. That did not exist." Feng Zhen, Yang Si, and the other old foxes had long faces. They yawned from time to time as if they lacked sleep and overused their kidneys. Qiguan Rang also had heavy dark circles under his eyes, but he held a fan to cover half of his face when he wanted to yawn. Feng Jin and Su Ku were also complaining incessantly. As the members who stayed behind to guard the rear, their tasks were not light. Not only did they have to maintain the supply of logistics on the battlefield, but they also had to take care of the development and construction of the various territories. Everything was finally on the right track, but when the Lord came back, they were buried alive by government affairs. Speaking of which, couldn't the Lord spend the New Year outside? Why did she have to come back? Su Ke's eyes were filled with silence. He had been with the Lord for almost 10 years. Since the earthquake in Dongqing, he had never enjoyed the taste of annual leave. Everyone else was having a reunion and eating their New Year's Eve dinner. He could only quickly eat 2 mouthfuls of rice and continue to be busy. What a ****. There was no such thing as an annual leave. Han Yu, who did not know what was going on, rubbed his palms together. Xie and Qin Gong were also eager to try. The other feudal lords chose spring and autumn to train their troops, but Jiang Pingji was different. Most of the training was concentrated in winter and summer. In winter and summer, there was no rest in the military camp. The training would also enter a high-intensity state. Xie and Qin Gong, the two newly surrendered generals, could take the opportunity to learn more about the unfamiliar military camp system. It would be convenient for them to lead the troops in the future. Qin Gong would lead the troops to Zhe County after the new year in Wanzhou. They would be stationed there for long-term training. According to the current situation, when Jiang Pingji attacked Wang Song, she would have to transfer the troops from Zhe County and Hu County. Qin Gong had a heavy task. He had to put in more effort to prepare. As the New Year's Eve approached, the atmosphere in Wanzhou and other places gradually became more festive. Red silk red lanterns were hung in front of every house. The lively atmosphere warmed the whole winter day. The students of the Golden Scale Academy wore blue and white uniforms with bright red warm coats over their heads. Their little faces were red from the cold wind. "Father, why are you here?" Chapter 12:31. Feng Yi looked at his father calmly. His expression was slightly embarrassed, as if he was hesitating about something important. "Father, I only asked for 15 minutes of leave from the headmaster. If you have something to say, please say it quickly to avoid any delays." Addicted to learning, unable to extricate himself. A life without learning was a waste. Feng Yi didn't like to waste precious time on meaningless things. Feng Zhen said, "Isn't the academy going to have its annual vacation?" "As far as I know, there's nothing for you to learn these days." Feng Yi lifted his eyelids slightly, his tone as calm as ever. "Reviewing the old to learn the new, I want to take advantage of this annual vacation to consolidate the knowledge I have learned this year. Only by stabilizing my foundation can I improve further." Feng Yi said, "Also, I secretly borrowed the textbooks for next year from the headmaster. The knowledge in the books is difficult, and I need to spend a lot of energy to read them. Father, if there's nothing important, I'll take my leave first. There's still time to discuss unimportant matters after school." Feng Zhen was speechless. Everything that should and shouldn't be said had been said by this kid. Once again, he doubted whether Feng Yi was his own son. How was this serious look like him at all? Feng Zhen didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt like his authority as the head of the family was being greatly challenged. Seeing that Feng Yi was about to get up and leave after bowing, Feng Zhen quickly reached out and grabbed Feng Yi's arm. "There really is something. This matter concerns my marriage. Do you think it's important?" Feng Yi lifted his eyelids, his eyes filled with one sentence. After holding it in for so long, just to say a few useless words. Feng Yi said, "Father, you're in the prime of your life, but your backyard is empty. I think we should find a family and add a mistress." Feng Zhen already knew that his son was on the same page as him, but he was still worried because he didn't hear it with his own ears. Feng Yi was his only child for many years. He was stubborn and different from other youths his age. This child had his own ideas, and Feng Zhen had high hopes for him. Feng Zhen didn't want to raise his child into a yes man, and he didn't want Feng Yi to be his subordinate. He wanted to know Feng Yi's attitude on some important family matters. But, knowing was one thing, but his son was so understanding that he was so touched that he almost cried. As expected of his biological son, he knew how to dote on his father. After Feng Yi finished speaking, she turned around again. Feng Zhen hurriedly pulled her back. "Aren't you going to ask who it is? The 3 letters and 6 rights should be discussed in detail. I don't have an elder by my side, so I can only discuss it with you." In another 2 years, Feng Yi would reach the age of marriage and could be considered half an adult. Feng Yi asked, "Is this father's idea or concubine shows?" Feng Zhen was stunned for a moment. He, who had always been shameless, was suddenly exposed by his own son. He blushed with embarrassment. "How did you know it was Xiao Nyangzi?" Feng Zhen asked. Feng Yi replied, "Father's hobby is very unique. How come I don't even know this?" No matter the age of men, they all seemed to like fresh and tender women. Only her father's taste was unique. There were thousands of beauties in the world, but he only loved mature and beautiful mature women. This was probably a form of devotion. Ever since Wan Xiu moved into the manor, Feng Zhen's private life had become a lot more restrained. Since he was busy with work, he didn't have much fun. In Feng Zhen's own words, there was a guest of the opposite sex living in his manor. As the host, he couldn't be too unrestrained and ruin the other person's reputation. His excuse was dignified, but Feng Yi didn't believe a word of it. If Feng Zhen really didn't like it, he wouldn't have written a letter to Feng Yi asking him to take care of Wan Xiu. Feng Yi took the opportunity to let Wan Xiu stay in the manor's guest courtyard. Wasn't it also because of Feng Zhen's hint? Therefore, Feng Yi wasn't surprised that Wan Xiu would become the next mistress of the Feng Manor. If there was a surprise, it would probably be that Feng Zhen had been well behaved for more than a year and didn't overstep his boundaries with Wan Xiu. The story of Feng Zhen and Wan Xiu was like a rat guarding a rice jar. In the end, it grew to love the white rice in the jar. Feng Zhen's face was burning after his son mercilessly exposed him. He said, "This was my idea." Xiao Nyangzi agreed, but she felt that she needed to ask for your opinion. "If that's the case, pick an auspicious day after the new year and get this done," Feng Yi said naturally. "Time is a bit tight, so Lady Xiao will have to suffer. I will go back to the manor after school to check the storeroom. The 3 scholarly documents and 6 rituals must be complete." Feng Zhen was speechless. Was this a son or an ancestor? I have observed Lady Xiao for a long time. She has a good temperament. There is no need to worry that anything will go wrong in handing the manor over to her, Feng Yi said. Marriage is a big deal. Neither party can be wronged. Since Lady Xiao and father have the intention to marry, father should respect her. Before the wedding, let Lady Xiao move out of the guest courtyard and choose a house outside as her maiden home. If Mistress Xiao were to marry out of the mansion and then marry back into the mansion, it would be somewhat improper for outsiders to see. I heard that Mistress Xiao and the Duke of Lanting used to be from the same hometown. Father also has some face in front of the Duke of Lanting. It would be better to ask for a favor and let the Duke of Lanting act as a matchmaker. Feng Zhen was speechless. Feng Yi asked again, Lady Xiao's status is special, and she is remarried. I'm afraid her dowry will not be enough. Father, do you want to add some privately? After all, there was the step of showing the dowry to the bride. This was related to the bride's pride. The dowry of noble ladies was accumulated from birth. Wan Xiu's background was not weak, so her dowry was naturally rich. However, Wan Xiu followed her ex-husband to guard Hanchang Pass. Most of her dowry was lost in the chaos of war. She later found some, but it was only the tip of the iceberg. Even if it was a second marriage, she had to have what she needed. Outsiders could not laugh at the bride. Feng Zhen's mouth twitched a few times. He couldn't force out a word. He just had to sit down and listen to his son's arrangements. Feng Yi thought for a while and felt that there were still many things that had not been arranged. According to normal procedures, the couple had to prepare for marriage for a year or half a year. However, this was a special time. There would be a war after the beginning of spring or the autumn harvest. It was impossible to prepare slowly. Of course, I have to add, Fengzhen's net worth was not small. After all, Jiang Pingji was not a stingy lord. Every time there was a great victory, she would plunder the enemy's property. She would always give away some money. In addition, there were many profitable businesses in Fengzhen's manor. After a few years of accumulation, not only had they made up for their previous losses, but they had also accumulated a large sum of money. It would not be a problem to make a decent dowry. Fengzhen said, however, there is no need to go through the public accounts. Just take it from my private treasury. Feng Yi was the eldest son of the legal wife. The majority of the family property must be left to him. He could not let his son suffer just to marry a wife. Chapter 1232. Fengzhen thought his joke was humorous, but his son gave him a cold stare. Father, be careful with your words. Changxing is still young. What does she know? Fengzhen muttered, you speak as if you know a lot. Do you want me to take you to broaden your horizons? His son had already had a dream leak. There was no harm in knowing some things in advance. If the boy had a dream leak, it meant that he would have the ability to carry on the family line. Jokes aside, Fengzhen knew that his son had been weak since young. If he really wanted to marry and have children, he would have to wait until he was 20 years old. Feng Yi said, Father. Fengzhen replied, What? 15 minutes are up. I will take my leave first. We will discuss other matters in detail when we return to the manor. With that, Feng Yi stood up and left, leaving Fengzhen with a cool and indifferent back. Fengzhen was speechless. This is definitely not my own son. Feng Yi walked back to the classroom with light steps. His expression was still calm, and one could faintly see his future glory. He walked through the long corridor. The short pine trees planted in the academy were covered with a layer of snow. A few figures in blue and white school uniforms sat or leaned against the rockery, benches, and long tables. They held books made of bamboo slips or bamboo paper in their hands. The crisp sound of reading floated into his ears. Every time he saw such a scene, Feng Yi's mood would jump, as if his body was light. He pushed open the paper door of the classroom, bent over and changed into clean socks and wooden clogs. He walked to his seat and sat down. Not long after he sat down, a figure also sneaked into the classroom. Why is Uncle Feng looking for you? Changxing opened her textbook to cover her face. On the surface, she sat upright, but she was secretly whispering to Feng Yi. Father and Lady Xiu's wedding is near, Feng Yi replied. Changxing pouted and asked, Is it near? Feng Yi said, When they get married, Lady Xiu will be the mistress. I will call her mother. Changxing was about half a size younger than Feng Yi. No matter how smart and sensible she was, there were many things that she could not understand. But she is not your mother. Is there another mother? Feng Yi said, Yes, but father is more important. Changxing blinked, her eyes filled with confusion. Feng Yi said, My mother passed away many years ago, and my father isn't that old either. When I get married at a young age, don't tell me I'm going to leave my father alone at home. While he was still young, he should find someone to accompany him as soon as possible so that he wouldn't have anyone to take care of him in his later years. No matter how considerate their children are, they still have another family to take care of, and they are not as considerate as their wives. Now that father has settled down, I can also put one of my worries to rest. Changxing was confused. He already had a mother, yet he had to find another woman to be his mother. Did he really feel good about it? She tried to imagine. If her father brought a strange woman to be her mother, she would definitely be very sad. Feng Yi saw through her thoughts. The person who will accompany me for a long time in the future will not be my father. Similarly, the person who will accompany my father will not be me. Changxing's face was bitter, her baby-fat snow-white skin was flushed. Feng Yi couldn't help but poke him, and a small part of his chubby face sunk in. He said, "You'll understand when you're older." Changxing said in distress, "Sigh, I don't want to understand. Brother Feng Yi can help me understand." Feng Yi said, "Okay." School ended on time. Feng Yi first sent Changxing, Sun Lan, and Qiguan Jinghui back to their respective mansions. Fortunately, the mansions were very close to each other, and the furthest was only a street away. He returned home before sunset. After returning to the mansion, Feng Yi summoned the butler to discuss his father's marriage. However, these days, I don't seem to see any interaction between the two of them. Why did father suddenly? The butler's face twitched. He didn't know if he should tell his little Lang Jun about the things of the adult world. Feng Yi saw the clues and asked, could it be that something happened? The butler said, 2 days ago, Duke Lanting bestowed a fruit wine that was newly buried the year before last. Master has been interested in that madam for a long time, so he used this to invite Madame Wan to admire the snow. His original intention was to get closer and talk about family matters. Unexpectedly, the wine was not like ordinary rice wine or sake. It was strong and spicy, and had a strong after-effect. Master boasted that he would not get drunk even after drinking 1,000 cups. He didn't control himself at all, and accidentally drank a little too much. For ordinary sake or rice wine, anyone with a bit of alcohol tolerance would be able to drink 1,000 cups without getting drunk. Although it was called wine, its alcohol content was only slightly higher than plain water. Even a woman who didn't drink could drink 1 or 2 pots. The two careless ones thought it was ordinary wine, the moon was clear, and the snow was alluring. The two of them were tipsy, and there was only a thin paper window between them. Taking advantage of the situation, they rolled together. Although it was a bit unexpected, there was no such thing as integrity in times of war. The two of them were unmarried, so it was normal for them to drive together. Wan Xiao wanted to keep this a secret, but Feng Zhen took this opportunity to bring up marriage. Wan Xiao was a widowed woman with no relatives or elders by her side, so she could decide her own marriage. Feng Zhen, on the other hand, had a son who was almost grown up. If he wanted to remarry, he had to ask for Feng Yi's opinion. After hearing this, Feng Yi's expression darkened. Ridiculous. Entering the bedroom of the opposite sex before marriage, and doing such a thing that tarnished her reputation, her father was really stupid. The butler was silent, as if he didn't hear Feng Yi scolding his father for being ridiculous. Even if Feng Zhen didn't do well, Feng Yi shouldn't belittle him in this way based on the current situation. After calming down, Feng Yi asked the butler to get Feng Zhen's private account book and the official account book. Marry her as soon as possible, or else it would be bad if someone died. The butler wasn't worried about this. Master only had a little husband after many years of marriage. Because Feng Zhen was born with a weak constitution, it affected Feng Yi. Not to mention that Feng Zhen had been taking hanshi powder for a while. Although he quit and took good care of his body for a few years, it still affected him. Soul imprint. No way. She heard that Madame Wan had some problems with her body too. The chances of these two killing someone were not high. Feng Yi said, you can't guarantee that you won't have it. A son knows his father best. Based on Feng Zhen's temper, he might do something ridiculous like sleeping in a lady's room when he finally had sex. If he didn't do it once, a few more times might do it. The butler was speechless. What the little husband said made sense. The Golden Scale Academy's annual break was about to begin. Feng Yi had a lot of time every day to prepare for his father and stepmother's marriage. He was so busy that he didn't even have time to rest. making the two people involved seem useless. Wan Xiao wasn't as thick-skinned as Feng Zhen, so she was a little embarrassed. Feng Zhen said, "Don't worry, let him practice now so that he can marry Feng Huayu's daughter in the future. I don't have to worry about him." Wan Xiao was speechless. Chapter 1233. Reality proved that the new year after the war was not a good time. Those who were busy continued with their work, those who had to work overtime continued to work overtime. Only Feng Zhen stood out among the crowd. Yang Si slammed the table loudly. He was so angry that his beard was about to float. "I don't care, I want to get married and ask for leave." The entire government office was almost drowned in thick bamboo slips. People had to walk on tiptoes. Everyone was in dire straits. Feng Zhen, the old and frivolous fellow, had gone to busy himself with wedding matters after giving the Lord a slip. Why? Was he discriminating against married and unmarried people? Yang Si saw that Feng Zhen was staying at home and not busy at all. He felt unbalanced. Feng Zhen held a plate of dried fruits in one hand and a thin, long, bamboo toothpick in the other. He poked a piece and threw it into his mouth. He said leisurely, "Jing Rong, the walls have ears. As the Lord's important minister, how can you find such a lame excuse to avoid responsibility? If the Lord finds out, she will be furious and very disappointed. Don't lose sight of the bigger picture because of the small things." Yang Si was so angry that he wanted to laugh. "Zhi, do you know that deceiving the Lord is a serious crime?" Feng Zhen asked for leave with the excuse of preparing for his wedding. Jiang Pingji felt that there were no elders or relatives in Feng Zhen's family to take care of his wedding, so she simply granted him leave. Not only did she let him take this year's leave, but she also generously lightened Feng Zhen's burden and pushed the burden on others. With one less main labor force, wouldn't the burden on others be heavier? The most optimistic estimate was that many people would be busy until the morning of New Year's Eve. If they took a little more time, they would still have to stay in the study to fight after New Year's Eve dinner. The houses of Jiang Pingji's civil and military officials were close to each other. Most of them were in the central area. They were either neighbors or separated by one or two streets. Yang Si and Feng Zhen lived close to each other. The former took the time to check on the latter's preparation progress. He didn't know if he didn't care, but he was shocked when he did. Where was Feng Zhen, who was rumored to be so busy that he jumped up and down? Who was this lowly person in front of him leisurely lying on a small couch in front of an open window, drinking sake and tasting dried fruits? Feng Zhen said he was taking leave to prepare for his wedding, but in the end, he was secretly sleeping in and hiding. If this wasn't deception, what was? In the face of Yang Si's threat, Feng Zhen was not the least bit intimidated. Instead, he smiled faintly and said, "Zhen did not lie to my lord." Yang Si asked, "You're resting here. Who's busy with your wedding?" Feng Zhen puffed out his chest proudly and said, "Who asked me to have such an intelligent and capable son? A son should be like this." Yang Si, he had already been showered with dog food by Feng Zhen, and now he was showing off his son. Couldn't he show some sympathy for an older single man? Feng Zhen cheekily picked his teeth with a toothpick and said, "You are all alone, how can you understand the beauty of having a virtuous wife and a filial son?" Yang Si immediately revealed an expression of disgust. He gritted his teeth and said, "It's time to let that Madam Wan see your virtue." How could Feng Zhen have the cheek to do such a vulgar act in front of outsiders? Feng Zhen said, "In the future, when it's fun in the bedroom, you'll naturally see it." "Jing Rong, you don't understand the joys of a married couple, Yang Si, that's damned enough." Having successfully disgusted Yang Si, Feng Zhen hummed a little tune. He reclined on a small couch, his outer robe slipping down to his shoulders, revealing a green Confucian robe. His hair scarf was loose, and his black hair draped over his shoulders. He propped himself up on the couch with one hand and reached for a steaming cup of wine with the other. He took a sip. At this moment, a gust of cold wind blew in from outside the window. The cold wind carried fine white snow, drifting to the top of his head in strands of hair. Auspicious snow indicates a bumper harvest. Next year will definitely be a bumper harvest, he murmured and sighed. Outside, the festive atmosphere was strong. Commoners wearing thick new winter clothes could be seen on the streets and alleys. After a few years of construction, the entire Xiangyang district had become the commercial center of Guangzhou. There was an endless stream of merchants coming and going from all over the place. The buildings in Xiangyang district were also gradually renovated and remodeled, from the original low and dilapidated wooden houses and stone houses to green-tiled wooden houses. The streets, big and small, were paved with clean and tidy stone or green bricks, wide and clean. Because of the repeated expansions and modifications of the city, the original city gate was changed to an inner city gate. Later, a gate and 2 city gates were built. In terms of prosperity, the current Xiangyang district was not inferior to the former Shangjing. The former was better than the latter. The population had expanded from the original 20,000 to 30,000 to more than 300,000. As the end of the year approached, the market was already a sea of red. The merchants and vendors on both sides of the street were enthusiastically promoting their goods. It had been snowing heavily in the past few days. The district headquarters had issued an order for all the commoners to sweep away the snow to prevent the houses from collapsing. The commoners had been maintaining this order for several years and had long gotten used to it. At first, there were outsiders who had migrated here who didn't care. In the end, a commoner passed by the commoner's house and slipped and fell, breaking his bones. The commoner was furious and sued the family to the magistrate's office. The magistrate's office sent bailiffs to inspect the snow and judged the commoner to have improperly swept away the snow. They were fined a sum of money, and the head of the household was also arrested and sent to prison for 3 days as punishment. After the heavy punishment, no one dared to violate the district headquarters' orders anymore. After a few years, sweeping the snow had also evolved into every household's winter entertainment. Young Si passed by a certain residential alley. Separated by a courtyard wall that was taller than a person, he faintly saw a burly figure in black standing on the eaves sweeping the snow. "Isn't that General Fu?" Young Si mumbled and hurriedly stopped the horse carriage. He tiptoed and tried to take a closer look. Fu Wang's muscles were very strong and strong. At this moment, he was wearing a short black outfit. The tight clothes were wet and stuck to his body, outlining the contours of his muscles and exposing all the advantages of his broad shoulders and narrow waist. Which man wouldn't be jealous and envious of him? He rolled his sleeves up to his elbows. The muscles on his forearms swelled and tightened due to his strength. Both his hands held a large broom specially used for sweeping snow. This doesn't seem to be General Fu's residence. Yang Si looked at the surrounding terrain and once again confirmed that he didn't remember wrongly. "Go, knock on the door and say that the master is here to visit General Fu." Fu Wang, who was in the courtyard, was also confused. He didn't have a deep friendship with Yang Si. Did the other party have to visit him and Lady Huijuan's residence? Yes, Fu Wang was currently in Huijuan's residence visiting the child and helping her sweep the snow on the roof. There were only a few old maids and maidservants in Huijuan's residence. The house was also relatively high, so it was inconvenient for them to climb up. Thus, Fu Wang volunteered. As someone who was raised by a pack of wolves, Fu Wang's style of doing things was obviously closer to that of a wolf. He didn't lack patience when waiting for prey. He would infiltrate the other party's life bit by bit and then take them down with a thunderous force. He wasn't afraid of failure, but he was afraid of not being able to keep his cool. Chapter 1234. You're here, Master Yang. Hui Jun had always been concerned about Jiang Pingji's affairs. How could she not find out more about the talent she valued? She immediately asked the servant to lead Yang Si into the main hall and treat him as a VIP. Fu Wang, the wild wolf, felt jealous when he saw it. He carried a cub in each hand and strode to the main hall with strong steps, looking like the alpha wolf announcing his territory. Yang Si was speechless. He was just celebrating the new year. Who did he offend? Did they take turns to feed him dog food? Fu Wang, an uncouth man, could openly squat in the house of the imperial beauty. Would the heavens open their eyes? Yang Si roared in his heart, but he looked very calm on the surface. He said, I didn't expect this to be Lady Hui's house. Please forgive me for my sudden visit. Yang Si knew Hui Jun. After all, she was an unforgettable beauty, but they didn't have much contact. Ever since they left Huangshui, Hui Jun had concealed her identity as the Empress of Zhongzhou and changed her appearance to become a servant girl of Jiang Pingji's hometown. Later, she was released to open her own house. Yang Si vaguely heard that this young lady had been in contact with Zhang Ping and Xiao Guang of the Mo family in the carpentry workshop. It seemed that they wanted to combine the pedal-powered spinning wheel with the water-powered spinning wheel. It seemed that there was already good news about this. Even though he didn't know the details, Yang Si felt that the woman in front of him was not simple. Hui Jun smiled faintly and said, What are you talking about, Master Yang? It's my honor to have you visit my house. Fu Wang, who was carrying the two cubs, coughed heavily. Hui Jun rolled her eyes at him. It was clearly an unpleasant action, but she looked extremely flirtatious when she did it. There are still maids sweeping the snow on the roof outside. I'll go and keep an eye on them. Take your time. Yang Si looked at Hui Jun's back as she left, then at Fu Wang, who was carrying the cubs and frowning. He secretly felt a toothache. If he really couldn't see the clues, he would have wasted so many years in the brothel. These two children. Could they be Lady Hui and General Fu's? Fu Wang nodded and admitted it without hesitation. The more he looked at the twins in his arms, the more he liked them. Especially his daughter, that charming appearance was carved from the same mold as her mother. Not only did he like her, but his neighbor, old man Xie Qian, also liked her. Come to think of it, it was strange that old man Xie Qian's granddaughter, Lin Wan, looked a little like his own daughter. If not for their different sizes, they would look more like twins. Fu Wang asked around and found out that Hui Jun looked very similar to Lin Wan's grandmother when she was young. It was really fate. Because of their children, the families of the two generals began to interact more, sending each other gifts during the new year. Yang Si rolled his eyes and said hesitantly, but according to what I know, that Hui Nyangzi seems to have become independent. After establishing a family, she became the head of the family, and the child also took her surname. Fu Wang felt a little awkward. Fu Wang said, My surname isn't important. I don't believe in talismans anyway. He was originally a baby boy abandoned by a farmer at the border. He was raised by a she-wolf since he was young, and then he met his lifelong benefactor and adoptive father, Fu Yang. Fu Yang gave him a name and changed his surname. Only then did Fu Wang have his own name. How would he know who his original ancestor was or what his surname was? To him, it really didn't matter what the child's surname was, as long as it was his child. Even if he had to take Hui Jun's household registration, he wouldn't have much of an opinion, because he didn't have the concept of household registration or ancestral inheritance. Yang Si, this made so much sense that he was actually speechless. General Fu loves Hui Nyangzi so much, it's really enviable, Fu Wang said casually. What's there to be envious about, Mr. Yang. As long as Mr. Yang is willing to nod, how many daughters of good families would be willing to follow you? Yang Si wasn't an old man who was left behind. He was clearly a member of the Dink clan who had no intention of starting a family. When Fu Wang said that, Yang Si's expression revealed a trace of unnaturalness. Mr. Yang. Could it be that there's something difficult to say? Fu Wang asked carefully, as if afraid of touching on Yang Si's sore spot. Men who were unwilling to get married or take a wife most likely had yang deficiency syndrome. Should we find some doctors to take a look? It's not good to hide one's illness for fear of treatment. Without waiting for Yang Si to reply, Fu Wang said, I know a few strong folk prescriptions. Would Mr. Yang like to try them? Yang Si, looking at Fu Jingtu's dignified appearance, tall and strong, he actually needed some strong folk prescriptions. He didn't say anything, but Fu Wang could understand. For men, some topics didn't need to be said with their mouths. They could communicate with their eyes and expressions without any obstacles. Fu Wang said, Of course it's not me. I'm fine. Previously, there were a few deputy generals who didn't get along well with each other in bed, so I took the opportunity to listen in. Yang Si's expression became even weirder, almost turning purple. Sorry, he was in good health, so he didn't need strong folk prescriptions to liven things up. Yang Si didn't want to get married and have children, not only because his mother was a prostitute, but also because of the influence of his experiences in his youth. From the bottom of his heart, he didn't kill Zhaonyang and Di Nyangzi, but he was forced to hide in the cellar and listen to them being humiliated to death. He couldn't get over this in his heart. He vaguely remembered that he quite liked Di Nyangzi at that time. Even his first dream was because he dreamed of her. She was intelligent, clever, virtuous, and gentle. Yang Si even thought of waiting for her to reach the age of 15 before he proposed to her. However, when he was young, he was only moved for a moment. Now that he was in his 30s, he had thought through many things. Whether it was his mother's identity or his experiences in his youth, they had all become a part of the past. It was just that, he no longer had the impulses of his youth. It was good to be single. When he was old, he would go to the nursery hall to pick a child he liked and make him his heir. It would be enough to have a filial son after his death. Fu Wang saw that Yang Si's expression didn't look good, so he said embarrassedly, It seems that I misunderstood. Yang Si said, Your prescription. When Fu Wang heard this, his ears perked up. The two children in his arms, including him, looked at Yang Si at the same time. Si doesn't need it, but Feng Zishe, that bastard, might need it. The medicine of tigers and wolves wouldn't be able to kill that *tch. Yang Si was full of depression after being fed 2 rounds of dog food when he went out to the government office. He was addicted to work and eating dog food. The carriage turned into 2 alleys. Yang Si was lost in thought when the curtain of the carriage seemed to be hit by something. Cold snow was thrown into the carriage. Yang Si was splashed by the snow and instantly became furious. He hurriedly asked the coachman to stop and lifted the curtain to argue with that person. Which naughty child had a snowball fight on his carriage? After looking, he realized that there was no one in the alley. He looked at the position of the curtain and then followed the direction where the snow was thrown. Jiang Nongqin was dressed neatly and held a broom in her hand. She stood firmly on the edge of the wall. She was the one who swept the snow just now. She said weakly, I'm sorry, I thought there was no one. Yang Si looked up at Jiang Nongqin who was against the light. His Adam's apple rolled a few times. He teased her for some reason. If you're really sincere, can Field Officer Jiang help me sweep the snow on the roof? In the face of this difficulty, Jiang Nongqin's expression did not change. Of course. A man should know when to yield and when to stand tall. It was just sweeping the snow, a small matter. It was her carelessness that disturbed Yang Xi's carriage. It was not too much to compensate for sweeping the snow. Yang Xi was speechless. Chapter 1235. According to the tradition of previous years, Jiang Pingji would hold a New Year's banquet on New Year's Day. She would invite the civil and military officials under her command to have a meal together and exchange feelings. Back then, there were only 2 or 3 people in her camp. The New Year's banquet was just a simple gathering to eat barbecued meat and warm a cauldron. Now that the family business had expanded, Jiang Pingji's subordinates had also increased by quite a lot. Apart from the mainstays, in the past 2 years, many middle-level talents had been selected from the Golden Scale Pavilion. Jiang Pingji naturally wanted them to attend an event like the New Year's banquet to broaden their horizons. With more people, the venue naturally had to keep up with the times and increase the area. To ensure that the New Year's banquet went smoothly, Jiang Pingji arranged seats according to the status of the guests. The mainstay could drink with her, while the slightly less talented people ate separately in the side halls. Jiang Pingji originally wanted to continue the fine tradition of the officials producing their own programs, but this suggestion was rejected by the audience in the streaming room. Lo Siji Lianming, although self-produced programs can increase the officials' participation, it's not good to do this every year. Those who have been with you for a long time know your temperament, but those middle management staff don't. If you force yourself to do so, it will easily damage your reputation. Gui Kaigua Fengshao, in my opinion, it's better to have a classification system. If an important official can drink with you, it means that their relationship with you is closer, so there is no need to be too rigid about etiquette. Since they were all on the same side, it was fine to let them perform on their own. You don't have to specially arrange singers and dancers for those who are arranged for the banquet. It's better to choose folk artists. This way, it'll be more approachable to the people. Jiang Pingji did not like spending money on singers and dancers. Such an extravagant and depraved life did not suit her style. If she had to make an exception for a group of middle-level personnel, she would not feel comfortable. The audience in the live stream room brainstormed and came up with a compromise for her. Not only could it make the subordinates more friendly to the common people, but it could also clearly distinguish their status and stimulate their fighting spirit. A lord who was kind to her subordinates was not a good lord. While being kind to her subordinates, she also had to let them understand the difference in status and intimacy. Jiang Pingji had the same idea. The suggestion from the audience in the streaming room was exactly what she wanted. If that's the case, then let the theater choose a few plays that are lively, festive, and friendly to the people, Jiang Pingji added. It'd be best if it's a new show. The power of Wanzhou flourished, and the entertainment industry prospered along with the growth of the economy and population. With Jiang Pingji's permission, Wei Xi vigorously developed novelists and related industries, using entertainment methods to control public opinion. After several years of implementation, the results were remarkable. The people of Wanzhou had been ravaged by Wei Xi's great method of brainwashing through public opinion, and they had long regarded her as a god. Didn't you see that countless men and women yearned for Jiang Pingji's favor day and night? As the leader in this field, Wei Xi had to take on this task. If not for the fact that Wei Xi was an ancient person, the audience would have suspected that he was a time traveler. This kind of method was not rare in the current era of the live stream viewers, but in an ancient era where entertainment was scarce, it was terrifying. However, Wei Xi had struggled for so many years, and the entertainment industry was still thriving because of him. After a few years, not only did Jiang Pingji not have to pay for it, but Wei Xi also earned a large sum of money for Jiang Pingji's private treasury every year. In the past, no one would waste effort in this aspect, so Wei Xi's torment did not cause suspicion, or rather, they did not think that the entertainers on the streets, the storytellers in the tea houses and taverns, a group of lowly people, could influence public opinion. They did not even dare to think about it. They disdained to deal with entertainers and despised this group of people. Naturally, they did not think that they were potentially terrifying. The previous means of public opinion was at most to make up a ballad and spread it through the mouths of hooligans, ruffians, and children. Wei Si's organized and disciplined method of criticism was a magnificent feat that had never been done before. Wei Si said, if it's a new play, it's better to let everyone watch it together, so as to avoid favoritism. Jiang Pingji thought about it, nodded, and responded, what you said makes sense. Pass down the instructions to let the theater prepare for the new play. The entertainment industry was gradually taking shape, and many other industries were spawned. Seeing this, Wei Si simply introduced the official theater troupe. What was a theater troupe? It was equivalent to the pear garden that the audience was familiar with, and its form was similar to actors. The entertainers acted with the novel scripts given by the officials, and at the same time, they could enjoy the basic salary given by the officials. If the people gave a lot of tips, the entertainers could also get a share of the tips. Real people acted out the content of the novel, which was more interesting than the stories told by the storytellers. Every time the theater troupe set up the stage to perform, the surrounding area of 100 feet would be tightly packed with people, and it was very lively. The people of Wanzhou waited for the new play, just like the audience in the streaming room waiting for the online novel to be adapted into a movie. It was painful and happy. However, the former did not have as rich an entertainment life as the latter. The entertainment industry in Wanzhou was under the control of the officials, so the people had no choice. It was good enough that their favorite novel could be adapted into a theater, so the people ended up watching it with relish and completely forgot about themselves. Jiang Pingji was busy with government affairs while arranging the New Year's banquet. She was so busy that she had almost no time to rest. It was the first time that Han Yu, Qin Gong, and the others participated in the New Year's banquet, so they did not know many of the rules. They could only ask the experienced people in private. Those who have families bring their families, and those who don't, bring their stomachs. The New Year's banquet is for fun, so there's no need to be as cautious as usual. Yang Si smiled and said, let's not talk about other things. The dishes of the New Year's banquet held by the Lord are different every year. I heard that there will be fruits and vegetables this year. In winter, most people ate meat or wild dried products. Vegetables and fruits were almost delusional. Fruits and vegetables? At this time of the year. Han Yu was skeptical about Yang Si's words. He had cheated Yang Si before, but who could guarantee that the narrow-minded Yang Si would not dig a trap for himself? I heard that it was Zhang Ping and Xiao Guang from the woodworking workshop who came up with it. You know that the weather in the north is cold, and the barren Beiyuan is freezing all year round. In order to resist the severe cold, the people gathered their ideas and came up with a good idea. That's how the heating bed came about. Yang Si said, this thing can make the room as warm as spring, and it can also make the spring and summer fruits and vegetables ripen in winter. It's a pity that it's a little expensive. Yang Si was a foodie, and he was very picky. Eating fruits and vegetables in winter was something that he dreamed of. Now that his wish had come true, he naturally raised both his hands and feet in agreement. Han Yu frowned. Not going with the flow of nature, not in season, and it's not harmful to eat them. People believe that there must be demons when something abnormal happened. Wasn't it evil that the fruits and vegetables did not ripen in the right season? Confucius once said, don't eat when it's not in season, which meant that they would not eat when it was not in season. Chapter 1236. Yang Si said, you won't die from eating them. They're all the same, it's just that the season is different. My lord wants to do things that ordinary people can't do. Fruits and vegetables that are out of season are naturally included. Moreover, it's hot and dry after winter. Consuming too much dried meat is harmful to one's health. If there's something wrong with fruits and vegetables that can warm the Kong, it's because it's too much manpower and nothing else. Yang Xi's words reminded Han Yu of what Jiang Pingji had said when she tried to recruit him. Her lord's ambition was to create a world that others couldn't imagine. What was eating fruits and vegetables that were out of season considered a big deal? Maybe it was just an appetizer. Han Yu said, "I'm not worried about that. I'm just worried that my lord will be accused of being extravagant." The Kong warming was not the first invention in Wanzhou. It was quite popular in Beiyuan. However, those who could afford it were mostly wealthy families. Ordinary people could only dream about it. With the Kong warming, the technology of the greenhouse was naturally not far behind. According to historical records, the technology had been around for hundreds of years. It was specially supplied to the royal family. Although the technology of the greenhouse could subvert the season and allow the nobles to eat fresh fruits and vegetables in the unseasonable season, the technology was too costly. There was once an emperor who thought it was too extravagant and ordered it to be banned. Over time, the technology gradually became history. Rather than saying that the people were going against the season, and there must be something wrong when things are abnormal, it was better to say that the greenhouse was too extravagant. Scholars also cared about their reputation. To say that the greenhouse was too extravagant was a direct slap in the face to their immediate superior. Therefore, they took a different approach and changed their argument. Is my lord still considered extravagant? Yang Xi laughed. Don't worry, Wenbin. Xiao Yu said that all the expenditures for the greenhouse will be from my lord's private treasury. My lord just wants to have a good New Year's banquet so that everyone can eat fresh fruits and vegetables in winter. It's not as serious as you think. If someone thought that the fruits and vegetables that were out of season were poisonous, then don't eat them. Anyway, Yang Xi was ready to eat to his heart's content. Han Yu could only be speechless. As long as my lord was happy, the New Year's banquet was held as scheduled. Early that morning, Wei Xi dug Jiang Pingji out of her bed. The maidservant helped her change into the 9-chapter royal robe that had been prepared. Jiang Pingji wore a heavy imperial robe with 9 stripes. She ascended the gate of the inner city to offer sacrifices and pray for blessings. The crowd below the city shouted at her. 9 imperial robes, black and crimson robes, coral pendants, jade ornaments and a sword. If it weren't for the fact that their clothes were different, the commoners would have shouted, "Long live the emperor." Even though he didn't do so, the commotion that was like a tsunami made people's blood boil and goosebumps spread all over their bodies. After the worship to the heavens, the day's celebration officially began. During the day, the market was already bustling with noise and excitement. At night, the streets and alleys were filled with people jostling each other. The lights were brightly lit like fireworks. Some were wearing costumes and walking on stilts, some were dancing cheerfully, some were beating gongs and drums and humming tunes. There were lantern festivals everywhere in the city. Vendors were carrying their goods and walking through the streets. Children were playing and laughing. No matter how virtuous the scholars were, they couldn't help but walk into the crowd when they saw such a lively and prosperous scene. It was very lively outside. The New Year's banquet that Jiang Pingji had carefully prepared was about to begin. The year before, there was a war. Many people spent the New Year's banquet outside. This year, her power was on another level. Jiang Pingji only needed to put on a dragon robe before she could ascend to the throne. The meaning of this New Year's banquet was particularly different. Su Ku, Qiguan Rang, and the others brought 1 or 2 family members to the designated seats. Those who had wives brought their wives, and those who didn't brought their sons, daughters, or grandchildren. If they didn't have either, well, they would come with an empty stomach like Yangtze. In this kind of formal occasion, no idiot would bring a concubine who could not even be seen in the backyard to cause trouble. Jiang Pingji sat at the table and looked down. She was instantly amused. She didn't know if she didn't look, but she was shocked when she saw it. Some of the people in her camp were married, some had children, and almost none of them were single. Feng Zhen, the prodigal son, was also going to get married after the new year. If he worked hard, the next generation in Wanzhou might be even stronger. Jiang Pingji was not only the lord, but she was also the elder of this group of children. She asked someone to distribute all the red envelopes that had been prepared in advance. It was counted as the children's New Year's money. Each red seal was filled with a nude piece of gold, which the goldsmith had made into various charmingly naive animals, which were very pleasing to the eye. The group of children, led by Feng Yi, uniformly greeted Jiang Pingji for the new year. Happy New Year, blessings rose and fell, and many of the children stuttered. However, their childish voices were pleasing to the eye. Happy New Year, all is well. Jiang Pingji solemnly returned the greeting. A few of the older children blushed. The younger children turned their heads blankly and looked at their parents. Looking at such a joyous and friendly scene, Han Yu's heart was filled with an indescribable feeling. For this New Year's banquet, he brought his wife and his eldest legitimate son. His wife was absent-minded the whole time. Although the smile on her face was flawless, the way she secretly looked at Jiang Pingji was very disrespectful. The eldest legitimate son followed the children to pay their New Year's greetings. He returned to the banquet with a thick red envelope in his hand. His cheeks were red and his eyes were filled with excitement. When he was about to speak to Han Yu, his mother, Madame Han, glared at him. The child was so scared that he shrunk his shoulders and became as quiet as a quail. Han Yu said, "Don't be rude at the New Year's banquet." Madame Han didn't even turn her head. She raised her handkerchief to cover her mouth and said, "I am restraining my son from being rude." "What did I do wrong?" Han Yu said, "My lord's intention was to make everyone feel better." "Madam, you don't have to restrain your child like this. Just don't be rude." He saw a few children who had received the red envelopes were laughing and chatting with their parents. It looked very warm and happy. This New Year's banquet was like a family gathering. There was no need for etiquette. Madame Han said sarcastically, "Lang Jun, you should be more cautious. If something happens in the future, even the smallest mistake will be a big one." Han Yu's eldest legitimate son looked at his parents' conversation and felt a little uneasy. Although he didn't understand what they were talking about, the atmosphere between them made him feel a little uncomfortable. Han Yu could only ignore Madame Han. According to her temperament, she wouldn't do anything out of line at the New Year's banquet anyway. If there was anything, they could talk about it after the banquet was over. The theater arranged a few lively new plays. The actors who participated in the performances were all the best actors. Everyone watched with great interest. When the atmosphere was almost hyped up, it was time for the entertainment that everyone brought. They played the guqin, danced with the sword, wrote calligraphy, recited poems, and composed poems. It was not terrible to have the same performance, but it would be embarrassing for anyone who did not perform well. Madame Han agreed with the literary talent of those people, but she was quite disdainful of their public performances. She smiled and asked Han Yu, "Doesn't Lord Lanting want to join the fun with the people?" Jiang Pingji had amazing hearing. Of course, she didn't miss the movements of Han Yu and his wife, who were sitting in the front row. Chapter 1237. Naturally. What's that? Except for Han Yu, the rest of the people were puzzled. They couldn't figure out why their lord would suddenly say something like that. Those guys were obsessed with the performance. They were all smiling on the surface, but in their hearts, they had already insulted each other. Of course, they didn't notice the conversation between Han Yu and his wife. Han Yu was so shocked that he was sweating profusely. His heart skipped a beat and his face turned pale. Mrs. Han was also shocked. She was embarrassed and she didn't dare to look up and meet Jiang Pingji's eyes. Han Yu's seat wasn't very far behind, but it wasn't too far in front either. He was still more than 30 meters away from Jiang Pingji. The couple deliberately lowered their voices so that no one else could hear them except the eldest son, who was sitting obediently. Mrs. Han was arrogant, but she also knew how to read people's expressions. There was a big difference between speaking ill of Jiang Pingji in private and being caught speaking ill of her behind her back. Even though Mrs. Han was experienced and had been to many banquets of the aristocratic families, she couldn't help but feel nervous at that moment. Her glib tongue seemed to be tied into a knot and she couldn't say a word. Her forehead was covered with fine sweat. Even though she had applied rouge on her face, it still couldn't hide the panic on her face. Ever since she was a child, she had always been the center of attention in the circle of aristocratic women. Everyone flattered her and gave in to her. Her head had always been held high, but at this time, because of the few words of another woman, she was frightened to the point of sweating and trembling in fear. She was afraid, but at the same time, she was angry and resentful. However, no matter how much the aristocratic families despised Lu Shi, it couldn't change the fact that she had become the most powerful feudal lord. And she, no matter how powerful she was only powerful in the inner house. She was nothing in front of Jiang Pingji. "What's wrong with you?" Jiang Pingji didn't look at Han Yu and his wife. If she did, the group of people present would know and Han Yu would be embarrassed. Jiang Pingji considerately helped Han Yu out. "I just remembered what Zixiao asked me before the New Year's banquet. He winked at me just now. Alas, he was afraid that I would break my promise to him." Wei Ci was suddenly called out, but there was no change in his expression. Instead, he smiled and continued the conversation. "Master, you can't blame me for reminding you. I have been looking forward to it for a long time, so naturally, I think about it." Today, Wei Ci had changed into a rather cheerful warm-colored thick shirt, which diluted his original alienation. In the words of the audience in the live streaming room, Wei Ci today was very amiable and down-to-earth. He didn't know what had happened, but he was able to continue the conversation. No one suspected anything. After all, Wei Ci and Jiang Pingji's cooperation was flawless. Except for Han Yu and his wife, no one knew what was going on. On the contrary, a few civil officials sitting on the counter vaguely sensed something. After all, no matter how fast Han Yu and his wife reacted, there were still traces left behind. Qiguan Rang retracted his gaze. His brows furrowed imperceptibly. Coincidentally, his hand was empty. He looked down. His daughter had stolen his feather fan, but her hand stopped awkwardly in midair before she could retract it. Jinghui. Qiguan Rang's thin lips opened slightly. His daughter shrunk her neck and carefully put the feather fan back into his hand. "Mother is right. This fan is my lifeblood. It can't be separated from me at all times." The snow outside had not melted yet, and the banquet was being heated by the fire. Only her father's style was different. He was holding a fan in his hand. Not only was he holding it, but he was also fanning it, mercilessly blowing away the warmth around her. If it weren't for the cold, she wouldn't have sneakily stolen her father's fan. Qiguan Rang's expression became a little awkward. He raised his hand and put the fan behind his waist. After all, it was a habit of many years. He felt uncomfortable all over if he didn't hold something in his hand. Chiguan Weisher saw his embarrassment and uneasiness, so she took the initiative to offer her hand to him. Under the cover of their wide sleeves, the couple held hands as if there was no one else around. For a moment, everything was peaceful. Chiguan Jinghui saw their interaction and inexplicably felt a little strange. Jinghui. Sun Wen had been working in Beijiang, Beizhou, for almost 2 years. Because of the New Year's banquet, he made a special trip back to Wanzhou to report on his work. His adorable little grandson, Lon Lon, sat obediently beside him, making the old man feel an unprecedented sense of happiness. However, Sun Lon, on the other hand, couldn't sit still. She kept twisting her head and glancing at the seats beside her from time to time. When Chiguan Jinghui heard Sun Lon calling her, she temporarily threw that strange feeling to the back of her mind and responded to her friend's call with a smile. Sun Wen saw this and remembered it in his heart. Lon Lon likes that girl a lot. Sun Lon blushed and said shyly, Jinghui is very nice. She often takes care of me. Of course I like her. Sun Wen said, I like him, but that Chiguan Wenjing is not easy to deal with. Sun Lon was confused. What did him liking Jinghui have to do with Jinghui's father? You'll find out later. Sun Wen held back his laughter and continued, if you like her, then spend more time with her. Don't bully her. Sun Wen also noticed that his grandson had become much more outgoing and optimistic in the past 2 years. As someone who loved grandchildren, there was nothing more important in this world than having grandchildren. If his grandson liked it, then he liked it. Chiguan Rang was a little difficult to deal with, but it wasn't impossible to deal with him. The grandfather and grandson talked in low voices. Chiguan Rang, who was some distance away, seemed to have sensed their conversation. He glanced at them from the corner of his eye. At that moment, Chiguan Rang heard his lord say something, for today's performance, I still need to borrow something from Zixiao. Chiguan Rang's attention immediately returned to the banquet. His lord got up from the banquet table and seemed to want to perform something. Jiang Pingji wanted to borrow something from Wei Ci. How could he refuse? With the green light all the way, Jiang Pingji successfully borrowed Wei Ci's flute and his daughter. Everyone was confused. When did Wei Ci have a daughter? He didn't even have a wife. Could she be an illegitimate daughter who was tossed around during the war? A few insiders looked at Wei Ci and then at their lord. They were afraid that the New Year's banquet would turn into a battlefield. Wei Ci was surprised at first, then he revealed an indescribable expression. His ears turned red at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. Wei Ci had once teased that the iron-eating beast was Jiang Pingji's daughter. Now that Jiang Pingji teased him back in public, didn't that mean that the iron-eating beast was their daughter? Others didn't know the details and were purely watching the show. As an insider, Wei Ci felt as if he was sitting on pins and needles. He was teased in public, and he was so embarrassed that he didn't want to show his face. Not long after, a servant girl came up with a black and white ball. The ball's black and shiny eyes were pure and clean. As soon as it landed, it wiggled its buttocks and quickly crawled toward a familiar person. Jiang Pingji smiled as she took the jade flute. Feng Zhen and the others saw the situation and were suddenly enlightened. They suddenly remembered the battle with the Gaoyue clan in Song Prefecture. Their lord's flute music could be said to be heavenly. Although she could tame beasts, their lord's musical talent was really unflattering. If she played music in public, her little show of skill had fooled the civil and military officials who had never seen the world. However, Salted Fish in the Livestream room lived in an era of information explosion, so he naturally wasn't that easily fooled. As soon as Jiang Pingji's performance ended, the bullet screen in the streaming room was like a blowout. All of them were praising her. Gu Mingzhou, the host, has finally shown her Mary Sue aura. It's best if she blinds them. Little gray round gun, not only did the streamer blind Ci Meiren and the rest, but my eyes are also going blind. How old was that fatty de? Even if it had been trained since it was in its mother's womb, it couldn't have behaved so humanely, right? Moreover, they were not used to walking on two hind legs, which was not good for their bodies. However, this little fatty was able to do it so smoothly and naturally. It was definitely a fatty demon. Luo Yu Ta Hua Xing, it cooperated very well with the host. It was even humming a tune just now. If this isn't becoming a demon, what is it? The Fairy Queen's Crimson. After the founding of the People's Republic of China, animals are not allowed to become demons. Tudu Feiqiu, the host doesn't have this heavenly restriction. Maybe it has become a demon. Didn't you notice that this fatty de was the fatty de that appeared in the live stream room a long time ago? It used to be so small. Now that almost a year has passed, it's still so small. As everyone knew, after a young fatty de was born, it changed considerably. The age of the fatty de on the screen was obviously very young. It looked to be only 3 to 5 months old. Jiang Pingji smiled without saying a word. She did not explain the secret behind it. Of course, this iron-eating beast did not become a demon. Its actions were all controlled by Jiang Pingji. She turned her mental strength into an invisible force and manipulated the iron-eating beast to do what she wanted. The truth was that simple. Jiang Pingji did not explain. Everyone could only attribute the effect of the performance to the magical, familiar, and becoming a demon from being fat. It was rare for her to perform, so the civil and military officials naturally gave her face and supported her performance. The atmosphere of the New Year's banquet returned to normal. Seeing that, Mrs. Han's expression became extremely stiff, as if it was covered with a layer of plaster. She did not feel good at all. She reflected on herself. She felt that it was probably her fault for being too obvious. That was why Han Yu had a handle on her. If she had been more cautious just now, she would not have been so embarrassed. Even though Jiang Pingji had considerately helped Han Yu out, it was still a slap in the face in Mrs. Han's eyes. It seemed that she did not expose her, but in fact, she had torn off her dignity and trampled on it. Mrs. Han felt so suffocated that she could not breathe. Her face was getting worse and worse. Han Yu said, "Are you satisfied now? This is the New Year's banquet. Restrain yourself. Don't lose your manners and make a fool of yourself." Mrs. Han would not listen to anything else, but when it came to her manners and dignity, she would listen to it very well. No matter how resentful Mrs. Han was, she did not dare to show her anger. She could only swallow it back. Jiang Pingji laughed and chatted with the crowd while secretly glancing at Han Yu and his wife. The couple did not seem to get along well. But, after all, it was Han Yu's family business. As a man, he would handle it well. Jiang Pingji was an outsider and the lord. It was not appropriate for her to intervene. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, Jiang Pingji took the crowd to watch a few lively new plays. Some of the new plays were warm and happy, and some were purely funny, like crosstalk and skit. When it was almost time, Jiang Pingji asked them to go home and stay with their families for the New Year's Eve. It was the first time that the eldest son of Han Yu's wife had a New Year's Eve like this. He was still thinking about the content of the new plays and the peers he had just met. Mrs. Han sat in the carriage silently. There was a distance of a few fists between her and Han Yu. Han Yu said, "After the New Year's Eve, I plan to send my son to the Golden Scale Academy for his education." "How can the Golden Scale Academy compare to my family school?" Mrs. Han frowned. "That kind of place will lead the students astray. Han Yu was a little angry. He said, "My teacher also teaches in the academy. How can it lead the students astray?" Mrs. Han did not say anything, but judging from her eyes and expression, she did not approve of Han Yu. So what if it was the Golden Scale Academy? How could a reputation that was made up of be compared to the aristocratic families that had made great contributions? However, her husband did not understand her. The more she thought about it, the more she felt wronged. In order to be a good example of a noble lady, she promoted the maids who had served Han Yu before their marriage. She even gave them face and treated their children kindly. She had worked hard for her family, but she could not get Han Yu's understanding and respect. Mrs. Han said forcefully, "If you want to use the children's future to flatter them, you can humiliate anyone but me." The sons and daughters of concubines in the inner courtyard could just go to the Golden Scale Academy. Anyway, they were the sons of concubines who couldn't be seen in public. It would be a waste for them to study with a bunch of lowly commoners' children. If she let her eldest son go to the academy, she would cry to death. Han Yu was so angry that his face turned green. The eldest son of the concubine lowered his head silently under the gloomy atmosphere. He did not dare to look at his parents. "You are not allowed to be willful and mischievous," Mrs. Han sneered. "Are you really as cruel as iron? Are you going to humiliate my son?" Han Yu said, "I am not humiliating him. I love him dearly. Why would I harm him?" Mrs. Han was disheartened. She was so angry that she and Han Yu lived separately. She left the father and son to stay up for the New Year's Eve and went to bed early. Han Yu let out a long sigh, but he could not do anything to his wife. "When you go to the Golden Scale Academy, treat your classmates with courtesy. Do not be arrogant," Han Yu gently reminded his eldest son during the New Year's Eve. The eldest son was gentle and obedient. Chapter 1239. After the beginning of the new year, happy events came one after another. The most exciting event was Feng Zhen and Wan Xiuer's wedding. This pair was really beyond everyone's expectations. After all, who didn't know what kind of person Feng Longzi was? Everyone heard that Feng Zhen was getting married, but many people thought it was just gossip. After all, Feng Zhen's image as a prodigal son was deeply ingrained in people's hearts. Everyone would rather believe that a sow climbed a tree than believe that Feng Zhen would change his mind. Especially the middle-level newcomers recruited by the Golden Scale Pavilion, they had a deep understanding of this. When Jiang Pingji dealt with Su Bei last year, Feng Zhen stayed behind to guard the rear. The new recruits would have to interact with Feng Zhen and the others. Putting aside his ability to get things done, Feng Zhen's image as a prodigal son was deeply ingrained in everyone's hearts. Many of the new recruits hadn't even familiarized themselves with the affairs of the city, but they had already heard rumors about Feng Zhen making a scene at some wine shop. How rare was this? Was there anyone in this world who could take in this prodigal son? The old official did not move, but the new official could not suppress his curiosity. He raised his head in anticipation, waiting to see what kind of fairy the bride was. In the words of the viewers in the live stream room, who would dare to go up Liangshan if they didn't have a few tricks up their sleeve? Feng Zhen said proudly, "This is called a prodigal who repents is more precious than gold." Yang Si sneered, mercilessly mocking Feng Zhen. "You're a real wastrel. I don't know if you'll really turn back." Feng Zhen choked on his words. How could he speak like a human? Was there a need to question his character? A spit and a nail, a promise as heavy as Mount Tai. If he said he would turn back without any hesitation. Feng Zhen resisted the urge to roll his eyes and strangle Yang Si. He gritted his teeth and said, "We're about to get married. Can't you say something nice?" Although he was a romantic, he was not a man without family responsibilities. It was fine to fool around before marriage, but after marriage, it was time to turn over a new leaf. He and Feng Yi's mother had been in love for a while after they got married. If it wasn't for the early death of his first wife, Fengxian wouldn't have completely let himself go after her death. Although he was unrestrained, he was only unrestrained and not a scumbag. The relationship between a man and a woman was about compatibility. A melon that was forcefully twisted would not be sweet. Mutual consent was the way of the king. He still had this bit of moral integrity. Seeing that Fengxian's explanation was logical, Yang Si could only respond with a cold huff. Could he say that he was very unhappy? Fengxian, that little b*tch, had found an honest man to take over his business. Now, he had a wife, a son, and a wife. He was a winner in life. Why was he still alone? Yang Si looked calm and collected on the surface, but in fact, he was filled with resentment. His face was drooping all day long, as if he was dissatisfied. Dian Yen, who was being taught by Yang Si, spoke up weakly. Isn't it easy for military advisor Yang to start a family? As long as you let out the slightest bit of news, wouldn't those matchmakers rush over like a hive of bees with portraits of girls in their hands and trample over your doorstep? Yang Si secretly glared at Dian Yen. Was it fun to tear him down? This crude and stupid martial artist had not improved at all. How could women be the same? What was the difference between a person without any pursuit and a salted fish? If he were to marry a wife, he would naturally marry the one he liked the most in his eyes. Any random woman would suffice. He might as well continue to fool around. If it's that easy, why don't you find one? He couldn't diss that little b*tch Fengxian, but wouldn't it be easy to deal with Dian Yen? Who would have thought that Dian Yen, this dark-skinned and honest man, would also commit adultery? I'm already married and have a wife. Of course, I don't need to look for one. He looked at Yang Si and stammered, have you forgotten, military advisor? My wife was a matchmaker for me. She's now the centurion of the casualty barracks. Yang Si was stunned. He thought back carefully and it seemed that there really was such a thing. This happened when the two of them were ordered to guard Hu County. Yang Si saw that Dian Yen, this honest man, was all alone and didn't even have a wife who could take care of him. Yang Si acted like a matchmaker and introduced him to someone. Dian Yan's wife was originally the centurion of the female battalion. She was about to be promoted, but she was injured and had no choice but to retire. After that, she applied to go to the casualty barracks and became an apprentice with the military doctor. She learned pretty good trauma treatment. This girl's character was straightforward and generous. Her family background was clean and she had no parents or brothers to hold her back. The key was that she was not bad-looking and could read a few words. Among the commoners, she could be considered a model girl that would be sought after by hundreds of families. Yang Si was tempted and introduced her to Dian Yen as a matchmaker. Don't let goodies flow to outsiders. He never expected that this matter would become a stone that would smash his own foot. This boorish man was really pissed off. Yang Si glared at Dian Yen angrily. The latter was at a loss and didn't know how he had offended his military advisor Yang. Flirtatious words aside, Fengxian was getting married. He still had to give his blessings. In this world, it wasn't easy to start a family. He should cherish it. From the time the news spread to the wedding, it had been less than 2 months. Everyone thought that the wedding wouldn't be held. With so little time, it was understandable that they weren't fully prepared. Moreover, Fengxian and Wan Xiu were married halfway, so it definitely wouldn't be as solemn as their first marriage. In the end, they had underestimated Fengxian's flirtatious methods. Time was tight, but the wedding wasn't shabby at all. So what if they were married halfway? A second marriage was still a marriage. What should be done had to be done. They definitely couldn't let the guests attending the wedding banquet laugh at them. It's rare for Zisher to be so serious. It was an indisputable fact that the wedding preparations were tight. However, Wei Xiai and the others didn't see any signs of haste or impoliteness. From this, it could be seen that Fengjin still took this wedding very seriously. Yang Si laughed coldly in his heart when he saw this. In his mind, he recalled the scene of Fengjin leisurely slacking off. The wedding was very attentive, but the person doing the hard work wasn't Fengjin. He was just an absentee shopkeeper, so what if he had a smart and capable son? Reality had proven that having a smart and capable son was indeed a great thing. Not only did Fengjin marry a beautiful woman today, but he also praised his son in front of the guests. He praised Feng Yi's face so much that it looked like a flower had bloomed. In the eyes of outsiders, it probably looked like a flower had bloomed. How old was Feng Yizong? At such a young age, he was already so methodical and organized. What would he be like when he grew up? Although it was just a wedding, there were many tricks to it. Just entertaining guests and dealing with people was a complicated subject. Feng Yi could handle things with ease now. He wasn't slick, but he was still watertight. Feng Yi's personality was gentle and not flamboyant, but he was a good seedling in the officialdom. If the world was at peace and his lord had the possibility of advancing, Feng Yi might become the leader of this generation. Understanding this, many people looked at Fengjin with unfriendly gazes. Why? Fengjin, this unreliable guy, actually had a reliable son. Wei Xiai could vaguely hear a group of people expressing envy, jealousy, and hatred toward Fengjin. He sighed in his heart. There was a Feng Yi now, and there would be a Feng Yu in the future. That fellow was the real troublesome one. Other people gave birth to a litter of children, good and bad, and not a single one of them would be successful. Fengjin, this sickly and frail person, only had 2 sons, both of whom were dragons and phoenixes among men. Chapter 1240. Perhaps even God couldn't bear to see Fengjin being so smug. He had only taken 3 days off before he was summoned back urgently. Fengjin was having a wild time. He and Wan Xiu were so intimate that they couldn't wait to be together every day. How could he care about the cold government affairs? I've rested long enough, Jiang Pingji said heartlessly. It's time for you to get back to business. Fengjin argued, My lord, this is different from what I said before. It's only been 3 days. When Li Yun and Sheng Wanwan got married, how long was their wedding leave? This matter had to be treated equally. How could she favor one and discriminate against the other? Jiang Pingji said matter-of-factly, Didn't I give you a long leave to handle your wedding? Fengjin was speechless. Was the time spent preparing for the wedding counted as a part of the wedding leave? As if she could read Fengjin's mind, Jiang Pingji almost rolled her eyes. How could there be such a good thing in the world? Fengjin's wedding leave was the busiest period before the new year. Jiang Pingji allowed him to take leave and assigned the heavy government affairs to others. She was already being extremely kind. If she let Fengjin take another half a month or a month's leave, the others would be resentful. After the new year, it was spring plowing and training. Everyone was busy. There was no reason for Fengjin to stay at home and be lovey-dovey with his lovely wife. Fengjin's request was rejected by Jiang Pingji. He could only resign himself to his fate and go to work. He was as dispirited as a salted fish. He didn't know if someone was trying to mess with him. Fengjin realized that the tasks he took on after he returned to work were troublesome and above average. He had been busy for 2 days. The dark circles under his eyes that he had painstakingly disappeared reappeared. He looked even more like he had kidney deficiency. This bunch of animals, Feng Zhen was smiling on the surface, but he was cursing in his heart. Did he not burn enough incense in his previous life to meet such a bunch of unscrupulous colleagues? The spring plowing was carried out in full swing. After Jiang Pingji presided over the ceremony, she stayed in the military camp to train the soldiers. Is the Duke of Lanting going to attack again this year? Tea houses and restaurants had always been the birthplace of gossip and a place for communication. The scholars within the borders of Dongqing who were attracted by the Golden Scale Pavilion loved to stop and stay in these places. They talked about current affairs and the world. If there was anything shocking, the Duke of Lanting might find out and punish them. Although the possibility of this was very small, one should have a dream as well. The Golden Scale Pavilion's assessment was very strict, and there would always be people who liked to take a different path. Since ancient times, many famous people had relied on this to be conscripted by monarchs. As the training became more and more intense, many scholars also sensed that a storm was coming. The war just ended last year, and the people haven't had enough rest yet. They shouldn't be mobilizing their troops this year. Everyone had their own opinions, and the more contradictory the topic, the more interesting it was. However, from what I can see, this Duke of Lanting is not someone who likes to settle down. A young scholar sneered and said, "Throughout the Duke of Lanting's road to success, when has he not climbed up by stepping on the bones of his enemies? It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that this person is a warmonger. Go all out." This conclusion is too arbitrary. The Duke of Lanting was forced by the situation and had no choice but to do so. Wei Xi's method of entertainment brainwashing was not something that others could imagine. In order to make the people stick closely to Jiang Pingji, he hired a pen to write a few short and medium-length stories. Most of them were adapted into new plays for the people to watch. Although the characters in the plays used aliases, people with discerning eyes could tell who they were based on at a glance. In response to Jiang Pingji's reasons for mobilizing her troops, Wei Xi also explained the new plays to the people. The ordinary people could only see the ups and downs of the plot and the awe-inspiring righteousness of the country, while the scholars could see the situation of the storm. Regardless of whether they believed it or not, the people expressed understanding and support for Jiang Pingji's several expeditions. Moreover, their Duke of Lanting fought wars, but every time she fought a war, she did not make the people unable to make a living. The military provisions and supplies were all stored in advance. If it did not work, she would open a private warehouse. She never exploited the people wantonly because of the war, nor did she impose any exorbitant taxes. Jiang Pingji tried her best to protect the people's safety and property interests. How could the people not love and respect her? Ignorant. In recent years, wars have been going on every year. Before he finished speaking, someone stood up to refute him. This is a little far-fetched. Although I don't like the Duke of Lanting, I can't stand your slander and slander. The man waved the folding fan in his hand. The wind moved the headscarf on his head, making him look rather dashing. He continued to speak with fervor and assurance, and the people nodded their heads vigorously. Since the earthquake in Shangjing, the world has been in chaos. The Qingyi army, the Red Lotus group, and other evil sects have risen one after another, harming countless people. The Duke of Lanting received orders in the face of danger to expel the two traitors, integrate Wanzhou, form an alliance at the Huangshui River, enter Chongzhou in the north, control Hu County in the south, and integrate the forces of the north of Dongqing to resist the external troubles of the north borderline. After that, the entire north was calm and peaceful. After a few years of rest and reorganization, the Duke of Lanting felt that the time was ripe. Only then did he send troops to the north borderline and recover it in one fell swoop. How can this be called being a warmonger? Being a warmonger meant mobilizing troops to fight a war without a sense of propriety and overdrawing one's foundation. Their Duke of Lanting obviously did not do that. She chose to mobilize troops to the north borderline at a time when their vitality was at its weakest. It was obviously planned, organized, and premeditated. Turning the north borderline into the North Province would also greatly damage their vitality and cause them to face the predicament of being surrounded by enemies on all sides. If they showed the slightest bit of cowardice at that time, they would certainly be hunted down and eaten by the heroes. How could they be compared to the magnificent scene of everyone sitting upright in the tea house and talking with fervor and assurance now? Su Bei was executed and Zhe and Shanghai counties were conquered. Most of Dongqing is already in the bag. If we don't take advantage of this victory to pursue and attack, it will be difficult to eliminate Huang Song when he has a firm foothold. In summary, Jiang Pingji had her reasons for mobilizing her troops. She mobilized her troops to allow the people in the rear to enjoy peace. Even if they didn't support her, they shouldn't make a fuss. What was the difference between this and picking up a bowl to eat and then putting down the chopsticks to curse? Her impassioned speech made many people's faces turn red with shame or ashen. Those who were more thin-skinned directly flicked their sleeves and left. Even the people could see Jiang Pingji's intention to mobilize her troops, let alone her enemies. Huang Song's side seemed calm, but in fact, undercurrents were surging in the dark. He was actively training his troops for war and stockpiling food on a large scale. It seemed like he was on the verge of breaking out. Everyone was preparing for war. Of course, in ancient times, wars could not be fought at will. They had to choose the right time. It was inadvisable to start a war before and after the spring plowing. In this era, the efficiency and harvest of crops were very low. The staple crops were basically harvested once a year. In other words, if they missed this year's spring plowing, then the entire year's harvest would be gone. In war, not only did it depend on manpower, but it also depended on food and logistics. Once there was no food, how could they fight a war? The war could only start after the spring plowing. This was a convention. Chapter 1241. The territory under Jiang Pingji's rule was filled with a foreboding atmosphere. She trained her troops day by day. Everyone thought she was going to fight Huang Song. Everyone was guessing when she would do it. Unexpectedly, Jiang Pingji was much more composed than they thought. The storm in the outside world did not affect the atmosphere in the academy. The sound of students reading in the classroom was still light and pleasant. Under Jiang Pingji's suggestion, the Golden Scale Academy made a rule to recruit new students every spring. The adults outside were busy with the spring plowing. A group of little radishes also passed the selection and became the newest batch of students in the Golden Scale Academy. Apart from the freshmen of the lowest grade, other classes also welcomed some transfer students. Despite Mrs. Han's strong resistance, Han Yu still sent 3 children of the right age to the Golden Scale Academy. He had 3 sons and 1 daughter. The eldest son of the legal wife and the second son of the concubine had been educated for several years. The eldest daughter of the legal wife was 1 year younger than the second son of the concubine. The youngest son of the legal wife was only 2 years old and was still learning how to speak. Han Yu sent all 3 children to the Golden Scale Academy in one go. Mrs. Han was so angry that she almost fainted. The masters of the Golden Scale Academy took half a day to test the knowledge of the 3 children. Han Yu was very attentive to the eldest son of the legal wife. He was also the one who taught him. Later, he was sent to Mrs. Han's family to study. Although the second son of the legal wife was not as valued as the eldest son of the legal wife, he was also taught by a famous old scholar. The only daughter of the legal wife was also taught by a female master. Although she was not as good as her two brothers, she was still acceptable. The masters of the Golden Scale Academy tested them one by one and divided them into 3 different classes. Han Yu's eldest son of the legal wife was in the same class as Feng Yi. The master of this class was Master Yuanjing. "What's your name?" Master Yuanjing took the child away and personally sent him to the classroom. "I am Han Run." "Greetings, Grandmaster." Han Yu was Master Yuanjing's apprentice. Naturally, the child had to call him Grandmaster. "You can call me Grandmaster in private, but you are a student in the academy. I am your master." Master Yuanjing liked Han Run. The child's eyes were very similar to Han Yu's when he was young, but his temperament was the opposite of Han Yu's. "Your father is busy with government affairs and has no time for your studies. If there is anything you don't understand, you must ask the masters. They will help you." Han Run's little face was a little hesitant. "If I call you master, wouldn't it be wrong?" If that was the case, wouldn't he be the same generation as his father? Master Yuanjing smiled and said, "This is not considered a mistake in seniority. Who says that I can't teach you after I taught your father?" After all, Han Run was a new student. If he addressed Master Yuanjing as Grandmaster, it would inevitably be a little unconventional. The other students of the academy were more powerful than him. Was Yuanjing's academy by the other students? With and by Master Han Yun. By you. Master Yuanjing arranged for Han Run to be next to Feng Yi. He hoped that Feng Yi could help Han Run blend into the unfamiliar environment. Jiang. By Jiangin. By and by was. The teaching model and environment of the Golden Scale Academy were very different from the clan school. Han Run was not used to it at first. Han Run felt like he had opened the door to a new world. In the morning, there were cultural classes, and in the afternoon, there were equestrian and martial arts classes. Before he knew it, the sun had set. Han Run noticed Feng Yi and put his textbook into his bag. "Are you ready?" Feng Yi asked. Han Run was surprised. It was the first time Feng Yi talked to him. Because of his mother's character, Han Run was shy and introverted. But he was different from Sun Lan, who was innocent and harmless. He always acted cautiously. He didn't dare to talk to Feng Yi. He didn't expect her to greet him. Han Run said, "Yes, I'm ready." Feng Yi asked, "I heard that some of your siblings are also studying in the academy." Han Run pursed his lips and answered, "Yes." Feng Yi said, "Great. Let's go pick them up and go back together." Han Run's eyes were filled with doubt. "Pick them up?" Feng Yi said, "The Golden Scale Academy is not in the residential area. It is not remote, but there are many people. After all, the students were still young. If they encountered an adult with ill intentions, it would be impossible to guard against it. You are new students and don't know the way. I will send you back." Han Run wanted to say something but swallowed his words. He always had a question. Why didn't they let their servants drive them? Why did they have to walk by themselves? Wouldn't it be easier to encounter danger on the road? Feng Yi comforted him, "There are people around to protect us. We don't have to worry about danger." Han Yu's mansion was the closest. Han Run and the other two were sent back first. Qiguan Jinghui and Sun Lan followed. Chongqing was the last one. "I just asked. Brother Han Run and his younger brother are only 5 months apart," Feng Yi said, "because the other one is born of a concubine. They don't share the same mother." Chongqing said, "No wonder they walk so far away. They are not close at all." Feng Yi said, It would be strange if the son of a legal wife and the son of a concubine were close. Aren't they all brothers? Feng Yi laughed. Brothers depend on the situation. Han Run has a good personality. He doesn't have any bad feelings for his brother, but his brother doesn't think so. The identity of a legal wife and a concubine is a chasm. One is the legitimate son and the other is not. The difference is huge. Changxing said, if Aunt Feng has a child in the future and has a brother, will he be a concubine's brother? No, he will be a legal wife's son. He will be my biological brother. Changxing was confused. Sigh, it's so hard to understand. Feng Yi said, you will understand when you grow up. Changxing was tired after a few steps and let Feng Yi carry her. Will brother Feng Yi have a son of a concubine in the future? Feng Yi laughed, no, he will only have a legal wife's son. Since it was the first time that the eldest son of a legal wife went to the Golden Scale Academy to study, Han Yu waited at home. How is the academy? Han Run answered with a red face, the academy is great. The classmates are great too. Although it was only a day, Han Run clearly felt the difference between the academy and the family school. In the family school, it was difficult for the master to take care of the progress of all the students. After all, Han Run was not a member of the family. The master of the family school always looked after the direct descendant of the family first. Han Run could only keep his questions to himself and wait for his father or the master to solve them in private. Although the progress of his studies was not slow, the efficiency of his studies was indeed very low. Today, Han Run found that the progress of more than 20 classmates was almost the same. The content that the master talked about was suitable for them. Han Yu listened carefully to his son's daily life in the academy and felt relieved. Feng Yi said, there's no rush in this matter. You should stabilize your mother first. He informed his father, Feng Zhen, about this matter. Coincidentally, Feng Zhen was also busy and directly threw him to Wei Ci. Wei Ci, Feng Yi was very embarrassed. This was a child's trifling matter, and it had taken up their precious time. She really felt bad about it. Wei Ci said, it's hard for an upright official to settle a family dispute. It's better to let the whole family talk it over. Feng Yi frowned. Han Run wouldn't have to be stuck between his parents if he could solve the problem by being honest with them. Feng Yi returned empty-handed, but Wei Ci took this matter to heart. It's better to destroy 10 temples than to ruin a marriage. However, Madame Han is a disaster after all. We should find a way to separate her from Wen Bin and his son. Wei Ci frowned. He had reminded Han Yu earlier because he wanted Han Yu to handle the family affairs by himself. However, Han Yu was different from him. He was reborn. Even if he had told Han Yu to be careful of his wife and her family, Han Yu would not take drastic measures before his wife made an unforgivable mistake. At most, he would be cautious. Han Yu could delay it, but his eldest son could not. Wei Ci spent a lot of time recalling, and it took him a long time to find the memory of Han Yu's eldest son. The Jiang dynasty had been established for more than 10 years, and the old and new generations had replaced each other. Among the younger generation, the most outstanding child was undoubtedly the second son of Feng Zhen, Feng Yu. Feng Yu and the crown prince, Jiang Yan, had a close relationship. His future was limitless. Han Yu had many children in his family. There were 3 sons of the first wife. Their talents were not bad, but they were very disagreeable. Disagreeable. This was not what Wei Ci said, but what the crown princess, Jiang Yan, had said. I'm just choosing a reading partner, not asking them to carry my sedan chair. They can't understand one by one. That Han Run is even better. He really thinks that my ears are not good. He insulted me behind my back and called me a bandit. So what if he's a bandit? I'm the crown prince now. He's not even a subject. Jiang Yan was the eldest daughter of the emperor. She had been appointed as the crown prince not long after the establishment of the Jiang dynasty. If there were no accidents, she would be the next empress. Her reading partner had a special meaning. Reserving the position of reading partner was basically reserving the core position of the next generation in the imperial court. Han Yu's sons of the right age participated in the selection of reading partners, but Jiang Yan did not like any of them. Han Yu's eldest son, Han Run, had been despised by Jiang Yan for a long time. After that, Han Yu's wife's family participated in the rebellion. Madame Han and her eldest son, Han Run, were also involved and ended up being beheaded at the Meridian Gate. Because of Jiang Yan's influence, Wei Xiai did not like Han Run. However, when he thought about the Han Run that he had met at Fengzhen's wedding, he was obedient despite his young age. Wei Xiai had no idea how he grew up to be like that. Now that he thought about it, it was most likely because of his mother's influence over the years, which ruined a good seedling. Han Yu neglected to teach his child, which led to Han Run's bad behavior in the future. What's so difficult about it? Just let him die. Jiang Pingji held a pen in her mouth. She raised one hand to put aside the processed bamboo slips and took a new one with the other. Wei Xiai said, "This won't do. It will be bad if Wenbin finds out. I was joking just now." Jiang Pingji took down the pen and wrote down the instructions. She said to Wei Xiai, "It's normal to be arrogant when one is born into an aristocratic family. Madame Han is relying on the power of her family. No matter how powerful they are, they still rely on me to survive and live. Go and check on her wife's family. I don't believe there is any aristocratic family that is completely clean. Once you find out, take your time. She cares so much about her family. If something happens to her family, she won't have the time to harass her son." Wei Xiai was speechless. What a good move to remove the firewood from under the pot. Wei Xiai wanted Han Yu and Madame Han to divorce, but he did not expect his lord to be even more ruthless. Jiang Pingji said, "Divorce is actually a good idea, but it's too time-consuming. Wenbin will easily find out. If you hurt your friendship with Wenbin because of this woman, it will not be worth it. Besides, Wenbin is busy with official business, so someone has to take care of the house. Madame Han has a bad temper, but she is good at managing the house. It's good to keep her." Jiang Pingji knew that Madame Han did not like her, but who was she? Chapter 1243. The busy spring plowing slowly came to an end. Time steadily entered April. The audience in the streaming room was looking forward to and worried about the war that had yet to begin. Many of them were impatient and gradually forgot about it. Jiang Pingji had been busy with government affairs for the past few months. Apart from presiding over the spring plowing ceremony, she spent the rest of her time running around and inspecting the situation. The two most important things were the progress of the water-powered spinning wheel and cotton. These two pieces of good news eased the tense atmosphere. Since Jiang Pingji supported Hui Jun to work on the water-powered spinning wheel, Hui Jun devoted most of her energy to it. The remaining space was left for the twins. The idea of using the power of water to weave was a fantasy. However, after Jiang Pingji's analysis and encouragement, Hui Jun felt that it would definitely work. If it didn't work, it must be because she didn't find the right way and didn't work hard enough. With this idea in mind, Hui Jun often went to the woodworking workshop to look for Zhang Ping or Xiao Guang. This made Fu Wang's subordinates think that she planted 2 blades of grass for Fu Wang. Hui Jun knew about this and responded with a cold snort. She and Fu Wang were not husband and wife in name. Their relationship was limited to having 2 children together. Fu Wang could not control her no matter who she was close to. Planting grass. It was none of his business to plant a grassland. Of course, her relationship with Zhang Ping and Xiao Guang was not ambiguous. Zhang Ping and Xiao Guang also tried their best to help her practice and perfect the concept of the water-powered spinning wheel with the knowledge of the Mahists. Several generations of models were produced in the past 2 or 3 years, but they were not satisfactory. It seemed that something was missing. When the Lord returned with the troops, the woodworking workshop had a new member. This newcomer was incredible. Not only was she a rare female in the carpentry workshop, but she was also a student who had been taught by the Mahist master. Bai Yuexia was not good at government affairs. Jiang Pingji assigned her to the woodworking workshop and assigned her to work under Zhang Ping. Although Bai Yuexia was a woman, his lord was also a woman. How could Zhang Ping dare to be disrespectful? It was just that many jobs in the woodworking workshop were tiring. It was common to work overtime and stay up late to revise the design. Zhang Ping was worried that a young girl like Bai Yuexia could not handle it. At first, Bai Yuexia misunderstood the woodworking workshop as an ordinary place. Only when she arrived did she realize that it was very different from what she imagined. Although the name of the woodworking workshop was misleading, it was actually a department with a proper title. As one of the workshop owners of the carpentry workshop, Zhang Ping's salary was only 20 to 30% lower than that of the registrar of the prefecture government. Knowing this, Bai Yuexia finally felt relieved. Her ambition was not to become an ordinary carpenter. The office space that Jiang Pingji allocated to the carpentry workshop was very large. The periphery was filled with ordinary items, and the items and documents were more valuable as they went deeper into the workshop. Bai Yuexia was assigned to be Zhang Ping's assistant. She had a higher starting point, so naturally, she had access to more confidential places. After working with them for a while, she fell in love with this job. Not only was the place of work interesting, but the colleagues were also very interesting. What made her feel most comfortable was the way Zhang Ping and Xiao Guang looked at her. The latter's eyes revealed a bit of strangeness when he first saw her, but the former completely treated her like an ordinary girl, as if he didn't notice the ugly birthmark that took up most of her face. Just this alone was enough to win her favor. When Bai Ning heard his daughter mention the name of another unfamiliar man, he immediately began to plan. If Zhang Ping didn't have a family, he would be a good son-in-law. Little did he know that it was not that Zhang Ping didn't notice Bai Yuexia's birthmark. He was so calm because he had a problem with his aesthetic standards. Why did Wei Ci want to sell Zhang Ping to Bai Yuexia so that Bai Yuexia would not covet Zhang Pingji? Because he knew that Zhang Ping didn't judge a person's beauty by their face, but by their hands. Zhang Ping didn't hear it wrong. Zhang Ping's standard for beauty was the hands, not the face. Why was Zhang Ping so obsessed with his wife, Crane, and still single after so many years? Not only because he liked to be single, but there was another important reason: the only 2 pairs of hands that he liked were his own and Wei Ci's. Wei Ci was male, not female, and he was also his best friend. Zhang Ping couldn't possibly attack him with a disease, right? Wei Ci noticed Bai Yuexia's hands. According to the aesthetic standards of a mechanical otaku, the hands could score 95 out of 100. Zhang Ping was blind and had facial blindness. Bai Yuexia looked like a fairy, so he couldn't appreciate it. After a few days, Zhang Ping noticed the new assistant. As an otaku who was close to the level of a great magister, he felt moved for the first time. Looking at those hands, he felt a feather gently tickling his heart. The unfamiliar feeling made him confused and helpless. However, Zhang Ping's personality was not much more outgoing than Wei Ci's. He was obsessed with carpentry and didn't know how to express his feelings. In the eyes of outsiders and by Yuexia, Zhang Ping was just a qualified and friendly superior. One day, Zhang Ping was modifying the latest version of the hydraulic spinning wheel. This version of the spinning wheel was very close to the ideal state, but something went wrong and there were always problems when it ran. Zhang Ping and Hui Jun racked their brains over this problem until Bai Yuexia's words woke them up. After the modification, the hydraulic spinning wheel could smoothly use the power of water. There were no problems when it ran for a while. Although the single efficiency was still not high and it couldn't be compared to manual spinning, if one person took care of more than 10 hydraulic spinning wheels, the efficiency would be like a runaway wild horse. When the good news reached Zhang Pingji's ears, the whole streaming room was in an uproar. Their streamer usually didn't make a sound, but the slightest movement would cause a big problem. When they saw the ancient version of the hydraulic spinning wheel, the audience immediately took screenshots and rushed to the top searches. However, Zhang Ping wasn't very optimistic about it. Firstly, the efficiency didn't reach the expected figure. Secondly, the spinning wheel relied too much on water. Once the water flow reached the dry period, the spinning wheel was basically useless. It was too unstable. It was better to use the original manpower. In addition, if spinning was completely replaced by hydraulic spinning, it would have a big impact on ordinary farmers. It was fine to make it for fun, but it was almost impossible to promote it on a large scale. Zhang Pingji had already made a decision, but she wanted her subordinates to use their own brains. Then tell me your opinion. Although Zhang Ping was a technical otaku, it didn't mean that he didn't pass the cultural class. He just wasn't as proficient as Wei Ci and the others. I think there are 4 problems with this. First, although the people's lives have improved, the clothes they wear aren't expensive and the demand isn't high. The output of ordinary households is roughly equal to the demand. Second, if the hydraulic spinning wheel takes away the livelihood of ordinary farmers, the value of the cloth will decrease. I'm afraid many people will lose their livelihood. Third, the spinning wheel needs water to run. If there's a drought and no rain, the wheel will be useless and can only be left to rot. Fourth, the spinning wheel can make a lot of things, but there aren't many materials for weaving. The first 3 points were very important, but the most important point was the 4th point. There weren't many raw materials for weaving. No matter how capable the hydraulic spinning wheel was, how much could it do? If the returns couldn't match the investment, wouldn't it be a loss-making business? You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.